meeting just now. I'm assuming that everybody's here that should be here. So I'll just start off with apologies, substitutions and declarations of interest. Diane?
I don't have any apologies. I note that there is a declaration of interest by Councillor Curley in the chat relating to agenda items 3 and 6 as a member of the Inverclyde Leisure Board.
And that'll be the same as myself and Lynn's put that as well. Now, as you can see, we've got agenda. Oh.
Sorry, Jim, can I also note that, can it be noted that in page 14, item 3, it talks about the funding at Parkway branching out got, and I declare I'm director of Parkway. Okay, thanks on that, Jim. As I said, under the education set of papers were set out, as you can see, communities. Item number 17 is on the community's agenda. The new smoke alarm and heat alarms. We'll have that at the end of the communities business, if that's okay. So that will be effectively agenda item number 8 on communities. Okay, and obviously, as we're aware now, this will be shown on YouTube. So I would ask all members to be aware of that, and hopefully we'll have a fruitful discussion today. Can we move to agenda item number 2, which is the community's revenue and capital budget? And I'm looking for Ian. Ian?
Thanks, Convener.
Thank you.
This is the report to the Advice Committee of the Community's Revenue and Capital Budget positions at period 7, which is up to the end of October 21. The main area of the report to highlight is section 5. That provides details of the revenue budget. The current budget is 4.436 million, and the latest projection is an underspend of 68,000, and that's a decrease in expenditure of 6,000 since the last committee. I don't propose running through the details. It is pretty much the same as it was the last time, so I'll move on to section 6. So that gives you details of the capital programme. The budget for the capital programme is 4.486 million, and we're projected to spend 657,000 of that in the current financial year. There is slippage of 680,000 or 51% from the original budget. That slippage is due to delays with the new indoor tennis facility and also the replacement floor at the waterfront. So up to period 7, expenditure was 394,000 or 60% of the projected expenditure for the year. And the cost of the overall programme is still been contained within budget. Section 7 of the report gives you details of the community's earmarked reserves. So the total earmarked reserves for this year are 92,000, and we're expected to spend all of that in the current financial year. Spend to date has been is currently 27,000 or 29.3% of the total for the year, and there's no slippage to report at this time. I'm not requesting any environments this cycle, so committee are asked to note the current projected underspend of 68,000 for the community's revenue budget and note the financial position of the capital programme, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Ian. I'll open up for questions for anybody. Can't see any questions in the chat. Can we, Jim?
Jim, if under community safety and the projected underspend of £45,000 due to a number of vacancies in community safety school crossing patrollers, do we know how many school crossing patrollers are presently vacant, and what schools are they vacant at? Thanks.
I think I'll ask that to probably Hugh or Tony.
For yourself, Convener. At the present moment, we have got 5 vacancies live, which everything has been put out to advertisement, but at the moment we're trying to recruit staff. And across the areas that we're looking at, particularly the short is Cumacombe and Upper Port Glasgow, we don't seem to get any community input or for any member of staff willing to do work in that area at the present moment, and we've re-advertised that, but we are hopeful at the present moment. We've got about 4 or 5 sites short, but we are covering some of that either with sessional staff, but we are struggling, as I said, within the Upper Glasgow and Kilmacombe for sessional staff to travel there. So that's probably the biggest gap we've got at the moment. We've got to review them on a daily basis.
Hugh, did I actually see yourself done in the school crossing uniform at one point?
For yourself, yes, I had to go myself one day to cover it. So we're getting that bad now that I've got to go out. So, and that's not a good use of my time. So we're really struggling within to try. So if anybody has got any ideas of anybody known who's keen to become a school crossing patroller, we're quite happy to talk to them about that.
Thanks. Is that okay, Jim?
Yeah, yes, that is. Thanks. But as you know, road safety has always been something that I'm, very keen on, and hopefully we do get some people applying for the jobs. Thank you.
Okay, Chris Curley next. Chris.
Thank you, convener. Just with respect to the underspend in sports and leisure, we are identifying an underspend of £45,000 within the free school swimming budget line. I think that we took a saving on this, and then we identified one-off costs last budget. I'm just wondering, is that £45,000? Does that go back to an earmarked reserve for this free swimming, or is that will be contained within the general underspend or stroke overspend of the community section?
Through you, convener, it'll just be going back to the as part of the general underspend, if that's how it comes at the end of the year. Probably the main reason we've got that underspend there is the COVID restrictions at the start of the year, when the numbers that were allowed in the pools at any one time, there was a limitation on that, so that's the reason for that. But it will just go into the overall underspend for the committee at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris, and obviously we'll have a bigger discussion on that in agenda item number 6. David, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just a very brief comment to compliment Hugh Scott on going out with the tools and doing his bit at Greif Road and Kilmacombe. It was noted, Hugh. Thank you very much.
If there's no other questions, can we agree the recommendations? Thank you. Can we move to agenda item number 3, which is the community's performance report, capital programme progress and asset related items. Now obviously we'll probably start off with Hugh in this one, and then we might get other people joining in as well. I can see Tony's here as well. Hugh.
Thanks yourself, convener. This is an update of where we are at the present moment with our capital programme reports. I'm not specifically going to go through the whole report, it's there for you to read, but I'll mention some highlights within the report, if that's okay. 5.1, Lady Alice Bowling Club. We're actually, myself and Tony are actually meeting with them tonight to discuss their ongoing funding gap within the project, and hopefully by the next committee we'll be able to give you a full report on that, but we are out tonight and meeting the committee. Indoor tennis, we see that is we're still progressing with indoor tennis at the present moment, and you'll see that it's been the environmental committee for approval for the lease to be transferred over to Mackay Leisure. Back in Park Bowling, there's a comment on that also too around in Tony's report. We've had an agreement with the club to transfer the land back over for the tennis, rank 2 of the ground. And there's been an allocation of funding towards that, but Tony's got more information within his report on that. Asset transfer, as you within the other key things, Eddie's here to speak about the ongoing works around a number of community facilities that are still outstanding, and maybe he can give you a wee bit more update on that. 5.9, sorry, we're looking at King George Building, and we're progressing with that at the present moment to get that to tender. I'm delighted to say that we've managed to receive another £350,000 from Scottish Government Regeneration Capital Fund to support the O'Neill Bridge budget for this. It will now take this cost of that build and renovation to 1.5 million. Just on the back of the community external partnership, Craigend Resource Centre phase 1 is now complete, and anybody who lives in that area, it's a very robust modern facility, and if you're in that area, I would recommend you go and visit that. Again, we've been delighted to say that we've now got an extra £50,000 from the Regeneration Capital Fund to support some of the outside work around that, and that's progressing at the moment, and that should be a full end story by 31st of March. The main shed, again, just to give you an update on that, we're working away to get that completed and out to tender and back for us before the deadline of the 31st of March. With the site getting done, again, we're delighted to say that we received another £50,000 from Regeneration Capital to support that problem. And partly branching out, as Councillor MacLeod has mentioned, is that we're delighted to say that the funding of 1.1 million has now been confirmed to go ahead with the investment in that area, budget 22 to 23. And we're delighted to happy to get any questions in the report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Hugh. I'm just looking at both Hugh and both Tony and Eddie. Is there anything you want to add just now, or just wait for questions? Okay. First questions from Stephen. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Before I ask my question, just obviously in terms of the Regeneration Capital grant funding, it's always good to get extra money. I'm presuming there was a bit of an underspending in this year's fund, so benefited from that. Obviously, excellent news about the Park Lee project as well. My question was with regard to the indoor tennis facility. Obviously, in terms of the Environment Regeneration Committee, agreement was given at the committee to move forward. Do we have an estimated start date in terms of when this project will get underway?
Through yourself, Convener, maybe Tony and Ruth can come in on this too. We're still working on that at the present moment. We're at the cost certainty stage of this, and we should know within the meeting tomorrow with the Untitled Ledger and the funders, just to get through the cost certainty, and we'll come back with more information once we've got that.
Okay, thanks, Hugh. The next question we've got is from Elizabeth. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Convener. So again, I just wanted to kind of echo Councillor McCabe's points there about the Regeneration Capital funding. It's fantastic that we're able to lever in funding from other areas to add value to the money that we're already investing in things, and just, you know, hope that continues wherever it's at all possible across the authority. The question I've got is really about 5.7. It's about the floor at the pool. I'm fully aware that across virtually everything where bits have to be bought and parts have to be procured, that there are delays at the minute, and I'm just wondering if spring is still doable, or if we're going to see further delays, or if we can foresee further delays in terms of that timescale, because I'm just aware it's been a frustratingly long process so far in terms of having that resolved, and just the kind of narrative that I hear about how difficult it is to buy things and get things. I'm just wondering where actually we are with this.
Good.
Eddie will probably take that, Convener.
Yeah, Convener, I can take that, thanks. At the moment, we're slightly behind the programme that's indicated there. We'd hope to get the project out to tender before Christmas. At the moment, is looking like at the end of this month to try and get that out to tender. So that there is every chance that the programme will be affected beyond that, depending on how the market responds to that tender. You're correct. At the moment, it is very difficult out there. And that'll maybe come across in some of the other updates and different capital programme projects. Materials supply, labour supply, particularly things that are specialist, are all being impacted, and we really can't say for sure until we get the tenders out and back and a response from the market as to where that's likely to be. So tender is crucial here. We hope to get that out by the end of the month.
Okay, Elizabeth.
I'm just wondering that if when we'll hear about it next, will it be at the next committee meeting, or will it be after the election? When will we hear about where things are with this?
Yeah, through you, Convener. It just depends on the tender return and evaluation. The evaluation can sometimes be straightforward, depending on how many returns you get and whether or not they're qualified. So it really depends on the return date and how straightforward the evaluation is. There should be able to provide an update at the next committee. If not a resolution, certainly an update.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
And I think I would echo that. I think your comments are exact same as Stephen's comments with regard to the tennis centre, because once we go out to tender on that, we would expect the same news. And obviously when we go into the education, we know the troubles we've had with Gourock Primary, and I think this is just the start of these problems. The next question's from Lynn Quinn.
Yeah, thanks. It's just to kind of expand on the movable floor at the pool. So, is there a date then, if we don't get the tenders in, is there a date that we may go beyond it? It's not happening in 22 and then it gets pushed into 23. I know there's a mention that Gourock Pool has to kind of be used as the alternative. So I assume that sort of time frame is kind of short. That if we go beyond a date, then it will have to be 2023. So I'm just establishing that.
Eddie?
Through you, convener, it's not impossible to do without the use of Gourock Pool. It's preferable to do it whilst the Gourock Pool is obviously in use, but we have discussed the possibility with Inverclyde Leisure if things do kind of go beyond the dates, and I think it can be managed as the kind of feedback from Inverclyde Leisure. So the intention is it'll still progress, but as I said, it's key that we get the thing out to tender and back and understand what the market position is in terms of lead-in periods for the actual floor itself and then for the construction period.
Okay, Lynn?
Okay, thanks. Just a minor point under item 6.2 is just can I respectfully ask that we refer to Inverclyde Shed as Inverclyde Shed and not Men Shed, because female members are welcome. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's been raised before as well. We can just try and make sure that that's in any future reports. Okay, can we move along to Tommy?
Yep, thanks, convener. Convener, just on the Rankin Park and Lady Alice Polo Clubs, I'd like to place on record my thanks to all officers involved in both projects and indeed yourself for all your assistance through that. The Rankin Park issue is now resolved, and Lady Alice is certainly in a much better position, and we'll hear more at the next committee from Hugh and Tony. So many thanks to all concerned. Very much appreciated.
Thanks for that, Tommy. Martin, Provost.
Thanks, Jim. It was on 6.2 again. I know a couple of people who use the shed, one male, one female, and they're very appreciative of the facility. I wondered if Hugh would know or anyone would know how many people use the facility. And the other thing I was going to ask was, is it sufficiently well publicised?
Hugh?
Yeah, for yourself, I've not got the exact number who attend using the group, but there is a number of people using the group. Obviously, the new facility hasn't been opened yet, and the work hasn't started on that. But we're delighted that there's a growth of a number of adults using this facility now and across the authority. But I can get more information back to you if that is suitable, Provost.
Thanks, Hugh. Thank you.
Okay, Martin.
Thank you. Yes, Jim.
I can't see any other further questions. Can we agree the report?
Convener.
Oh, you want to come in, Jim?
Yeah, yes, please, thanks. Just regarding the indoor tennis centre, on the back of what Stephen had asked about, a start date, my question was going to be about a completion date. But obviously, if we don't have a start date, we'll not have a completion date. But hopefully, we can get these dates sorted out as soon as possible, because it's been a few years now. My other question was around the community hub, King George VI building. A couple of people had. Well, first of all, can I congratulate Hugh and the service in securing the extra funding of £350,000 from the Scottish Government. That's very good news. And likewise, I'm glad to see that some other projects have got extra funding from the Scottish Government. My question is, have we got any sort of timescales for when the building, I know it's going out to tender, I think, but have we got any completion timescale dates? It's just a few people have asked me in recent times, you know, about how the building's going, and when you know, the project from Clune Park would be moving over. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Eddie, can you help with that?
Yeah, thanks, Convener, through you. It really just depends on the tender exercise. So it has to be out and returned to allow us to be in a position to accept a contract by the end of the current financial year. So the outcome of that exercise will dictate when we can start on site. The project isn't a significantly long project, it's less than a year. And I think the indication we gave previously was around about the end of the year, maybe into the start of the next year, we anticipate completion. So I can't give a date, obviously, but an indication around those dates is as best we can do until we get a tender accepted and a formal award. But hopefully that's helpful just now.
Okay, Jim?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, and now I can't see any other questions. Can we agree the report? Thank you. Can we move to agenda item number 4, which is the Communities Update Report, just an overview of national and local initiatives. And it'll be Tony. We'll start with this one. Tony?
Okay, thank you very much, Convener. So this report, there's quite a lot in this report, so if you just bear with me, I'll just give you an overview. So it provides the committee with an update on the developments of the communities part of the committee. So it provided updates on the return of some of the key services of CLD, such as youth work, adult learning and sport, which are delivered, of course, by our own service, but also in partnership with other services within the CLD partnership. We've also provided just an annual update on the Council's activities during 2021 of the 16 days of activism to eliminate violence against women. And there's also an update on the positive evaluation that the CLD Centre was given by SQA on its accreditation arrangements. So they've said that they've got a high level of confidence in the arrangements that exist within CLD in terms of accreditation. We continue to work with our partners in relation to services with autism. Our own services have increased participation, but some of our voluntary organisations, as you can see from the update, have yet to return to the full service. Hugh and his team still are trying to offer as much support as we can, but obviously as a voluntary organisation, it depends on what they want to do too. But it's just to give you an update on that, because I know it was asked for at committee last time. We've also provided just a evaluation on the affordable childcare that we ran, and the team are now exploring options for this year. Obviously, that was dependent on Scottish Government funding, so we're in early stage thinking what we might be able to provide going forward, but that, of course, is dependent on further funding. I've also provided notification of the use of the emergency powers to secure the second drink at Rankin Park Bowling Club. Hugh talked about that earlier, just in order that we could progress the tennis facility and also allow them to undertake minor repairs to the clubhouse, just in recognition of the work that they've done to allow us to try and progress this. And finally, within cultural services, an update is provided on the progress of the Culture Collective, which so far has supported 26 artists and potentially with another 37 next year. We've also received notification, which is not included in this paper, that more funding is on its way from Creative Scotland. But when that comes in, I'll obviously update committee when that comes in and what the plan is for that at a later date, once we know how much that will be. And finally, just asking committee to note the successful award that Alana got from the Public Library Improvement Fund in terms of its return from COVID, and also the details of the projects and how the money is being spent is detailed in the report as well. Happy to take any questions that anybody has. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Tony. And we could see that Elizabeth has put in a declaration regarding the beacon at 4.9. I should have done the same likewise. So if you can take a note of that, and can we go to Councillor McElhenney, Chris?
Thanks, convener. My video feed seems to be a bit slow, so I'm just clarifying. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks. It's just in relation to 4.7. I know it's £25,000, or previously, I think either at the last committee or the committee before that, I had raised the question about the use of emergency powers. Obviously, previously we were talking 7 figures, and I know we're only talking a 5-figure sum in this instance. But again, it's just that point about the tennis facility certainly isn't something the committee wasn't aware of or anything new. It's been on the committee's agenda for, I think, into years now, as has the requirement for upgrades at the Rankin Park Bowling Club, as welcome as no doubt they are to the members of the bowling club. Could I just get a clarification, or perhaps not a clarification, a justification for why it was deemed that we couldn't have brought a report to this committee, actually setting out details on this item at the last committee, or indeed at this committee? And just in terms of the legal precedent in that the grant was made in recognition of the cooperation of the Rankin Park Bowling Club, which is really good that the club has cooperated with the council. You know, I think we should have certainly cooperated better many years ago, so we didn't spend £1.5 million on a football and, you know, second on the tennis court, and then, you know, further money again on the bowling club. But what exactly is the standing orders in terms of our allocation of grant funding, considering the only sentence here says that the grant was made in recognition of cooperation of a private members club? So, you know, I'm a member of several private members clubs, as I know many people here are. So if there are incidences that they cooperate, whether it's when roads are getting relaid or whatever, I mean, is that justification for grant funding? Because I'm sure there are many clubs that would, particularly in Gourock, would quite like £25,000 of council grants towards refurbishments. And just looking at that, I don't quite see what the justification is. That, so this club has been given a grant of 25,000 because they cooperated with the council. So one would assume then that other private member clubs in Gourock, Greenock, Port Glasgow, across Inverclyde, I know many from my Port Glasgow juniors days up the top of Port Glasgow that I'm sure Councillor Wilson would agree would like a £25,000 grant. So what exactly is the criteria then for applying for this cooperation grant?
It's not a cooperation grant. I'll ask Tony to come in on the specifics about the second rink and us getting the second rink back off him, and then I'll ask Anne Sinclair just to comment on Chris's point about standing orders. Tony.
Okay, thank you very much, convener. The use of emergency powers was done because it was time critical in relation to the next phase of trying to get the funding from Sports Scotland, and also to get the planning permission through. So in respect of the emergency powers, it fell between two committees, and that was why we used the emergency powers approach. We've been working with Rankin Park Bowling Club for a number of months now to try and secure the second rink, because we had to move, as you know, we had to move the location of the tennis facility onto that second rink following the report from SEPA. So the grant is not there for all other clubs. I accept your point about other clubs would appreciate that, but this was entirely connected to the progress of the tennis facility, and it allowed also the club to undertake some minor repairs within the building itself. So it was about a time critical factor, and also it was reflective of the work that we'd undertaken with the club over many months in order to try and secure that site so that we could progress with the tennis facility and not lose the Sports Scotland funding for the facility.
Okay, thanks.
Can just come in as a supplementary to that point.
Chris, I actually said to you, I'll get Anne to comment on whether or not it was right to use emergency powers. I'd said that at the start there. Anne?
Thank you, convener. Yes, I mean, it was absolutely appropriate. The emergency powers were used as has been explained, there was a degree of urgency in relation to this matter. It was expedient that emergency powers would be used at that particular time, and certainly in terms of the scheme of delegation, it was appropriate. So I've got no concern about the use of the powers. As the members pointed out, it was a nominal sum, and there's clearly a justification for using it. I'm not able to provide an answer to Councillor McElhenney in relation to the standing orders in terms of the grant funding, but I can certainly look into that matter for you, and I can perhaps contact you after the committee to provide you with the answer in relation to that matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Chris, now have you got a supplementary?
I mean, I would obviously just challenge the officer's point about it being time critical. I just don't accept that a project that's well planned and we get regular updates at committee can suddenly, between committees, become time critical, that we need to use emergency powers to give £25,000 of a grant to a private bowling club. So I mean, that would be a point. I don't see why you couldn't have, you must have known, as you said, I think it's years actually, not months, this has been ongoing. I just think in principle we should be avoiding using emergency powers because, something's fell out with being properly planned for into a committee cycle. And the point that hasn't been answered, which it wasn't so much the legal question, wasn't about the use of emergency powers, because the standing orders allow emergency powers to be used and they allow committees to scrutinise that, so that's absolutely fine. The legal point was on, where are we with making a decision that, we can, whether at committee or by using emergency powers, just grant £25,000 to private bowling clubs because they've cooperated with the council. For example, if this is a legal question, would it be competent for me to propose at this meeting that due to the cooperation of the two bowling clubs in Gourock during the COVID pandemic, that the committee awards them £25,000 each of a grant? Would that be competent for me to propose that?
Can I just think with that there? Thanks, Chris, for that. But I actually think that Tony, Mr. McEwen, has answered that fully, and so I don't intend to bring him back in to answer that. I think it was a full answer he'd already given you. I'm looking to see.
It's a specific legal question, convener. This is a scrutiny committee in which members scrutinise officers through you as a convener. So I don't understand from Mr. McEwen's answer. I don't think he's answered the question. It's a pretty clear question. When and how do we decide how we get to just give one-off grants to clubs? So I've asked, on that train of thought, would it be competent then for me to say, well, there's two bowling clubs in Gourock. They've been, really compliant and they've really cooperated with the council.
He has answered the question in so much he actually said, given the fact that it was time critical, given the fact that there was a second ring involved in it, that was the reason why we had to do it. But if you wish to reiterate that, I'll bring in Tony McEwen again to go over what he'd already said. Tony, if you like, hold on, I'm bringing the officer in, Chris.
Yeah, okay, because it says the grants were for repairs and upgrades, not for purchasing a rink.
Sorry, the rink, we weren't purchasing the rink. The rink, essentially, we were wanting to bring it back into council control, really, so that we could obviously build on it. And the club had indicated as well their wish to give up that rink as well, but there were a number of factors over a couple of months about whether we were proceeding on the rink, and then the club decided that they no longer wanted to give up the rink, and so there was a lot of work taking place over the past 3 or 4 months, and then we got to a point where we had to move between the committee cycle. So that, as far as we needed the decision made between the two committee meetings, and that's why we moved towards emergency powers.
Okay, thanks for that, Tony. And you wish to comment on the legality of what Councillor McElhenney said?
I can't really add a great deal, I'm afraid, other than members will be aware of the limitation of this particular committee, and that we can't. We wouldn't be able to commit ourselves to any particular funding, but certainly it would be open to a member to ask for a report to be brought back in relation to any particular proposal. I'm sorry, I'm not able to assist further. I see that the
I know.
Chair, that Councillor McCabe has his hand up.
I see that as well, Anne. Councillor McCabe, and if it's in this point.
Yeah, as in this point, I think there's maybe been an oversight here, because normally if we have emergency powers, the actual emergency powers report is reported to committee. It should have probably been attached as an attachment to this report, and I would suggest that that report, emergency report, is circulated to all members of the committee. I was obviously one of the members who approved the emergency power, along yourself, convener, and Councillor Robertson. I was doing it in my capacity because the two vice conveners were not available at the time. So I'm more than happy for that report to be circulated to members of the committee. I think it should be circulated to members of the committee, and on the basis of that report, I was happy to sign the emergency powers.
Okay, Ruth, can you circulate that report to all members? Okay.
Yes, happy to do so.
My next question is from Councillor Brennan. Martin.
Thanks, Jim. It's in 4.8, and there seems to be a lot of support for children with autism from the report, but I'd like to ask, is it sufficient? You know, it's very good what various agencies are doing. And I also note that I think I'm correct in saying that Reach for Autism has ceased to operate. Does that in any way create a hole in our provision for children with autism?
Tony?
Can I ask Hugh to answer that? If
yes, certainly.
He's aware of the clubs in question.
Yeah, through yourself, convener, we are aware of, obviously, the organisation is folded. HSCP are now leading the strategy for autism through Alan Stevenson, and at the present moment they are working with the plan to take that forward. There doesn't seem to be a gap at the present moment because of the facility close. I think the biggest concern we're finding is some of the groups coming back after COVID and then being more confident to come back into the situation and meeting regular. So that's something we're certainly working with the group to try and do. But with Reach closing, it doesn't seem to have a major impact. As far as I'm aware, the young people of the Reach are still involved within the group, but also still supporting HSCP's engagement. But the overall organisation is giving up the facility, and but I'm understanding the young people are doing some training on that.
Hugh, this is one of these questions which is impossible to answer, but how would you describe our support for children with autism? Would it be good or very good or whatever?
I think there's two elements in that. I think there's the formal education stuff that Ruth might be able to come in front, but also the community-based stuff. I think the agencies is out there, especially the work that Youth Connection does, with the Connect groups is very strong for a certain age group. But again, everything else, there's probably gaps in services here, there and everywhere. But at the moment, I think we've got a robust programme by Youth Connections. And obviously, we're trying to encourage the other voluntary groups to start to engage again and have more facilities. But Ruth might take on the services for young people and education.
Ruth, would you like to comment?
Yes, I'll come in. Probably the COVID-19 pandemic had the biggest impact on those with additional support needs, and autism being one of them, mainly because it took people out of routine. We have got comprehensive support packages in school to help people to return to what we hope will eventually be a normality, but we are still in a slightly different situation. So there are supports within schools being targeted at those who are struggling, and that will include those on the autistic spectrum disorder, because they're the people who are going to have perhaps suffered most. What we are seeing as well is when people are looking at provision over the holidays, we are seeing an increase in people wanting provision for children on the autistic spectrum. and we're just initially looking at what that might look like over this summer, and what that might mean for the difference between childcare and also activities, because children on the autistic spectrum sometimes don't take to noisy play schemes and things like that. So the question about the provision within schools, it's a strong provision. It takes time sometimes to work with young people, but education services are very nurturing. But also we do have an eye on the future to think what that holiday provision may look like, because that's the feedback we're getting, where parents do want a bit of respite, and we've got play for all, but that's for the more severe and complex.
Okay, Martin.
Thank you. Thanks, Ruth. Yes, thanks, Jim.
Tommy, you want to come back in?
Yes, thanks, convener. Just on the Rankin Park, I have to say I'm quite happy with the response I've received from officers. The fact the council owned the Rankin Park building, and the Rankin Park building has needed repairs for a significant amount of time, and I've had ongoing discussions with officers over a long period of time, convener, as you know. So I've certainly no issue with that, and I'm disappointed with some of Councillor McElhaney's comments, I have to say. And I'll leave it at that just now, convener. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm quite happy, and I think the right thing's been done. The build needs repaired. The club have been there a long time. They celebrate their anniversary next year, so I really don't see an issue here.
Okay, thanks, Tommy. Can we go on to Lynn? Lynn?
Yeah, thanks. Hopefully my question will be a lot easier to answer. So first of all, I just want to make a comment on the 16-day of activism. Really good to have the women's survey input in that to kind of bring it to become a bit more local. So thanks for that. I've just got a quick question on the active schools team. So I'm hearing that because of COVID restrictions, then some of the team members can only go into one school per day. They can't be across, but normally they sometimes cut across schools. Have we got any information about when that restriction is likely to be lifted?
Okay. I'm looking to see who wishes to take that.
Jim, can we after to that, and then maybe Ruth and Tony can come in?
Okay, thanks, Hugh.
What we're doing at the present moment is we're reviewing that on a weekly basis. We're now going into 2 schools, maybe 3 schools a day, if it's outdoor education that we're doing and not within the building. Obviously, we're waiting for the restrictions to reduce as best they can within the school, but we are very working. I had a meeting with the team this morning, so we are planning to go back in again as best we can, following the guidelines that's there. But we are aware that some schools had that in place, but we're now trying to resolve that and moving back to not a full programme, but getting there to have offer all our services. Out with the school pro today, we're again looking at that to make sure that there's better opportunities for active schools to be involved out with school. We're keen to make sure all the stuff is outdoor, so that takes away from the issues that we've got within the classrooms or within the gyms.
Okay, Lynn?
Great, thanks, that's reassuring, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to bring Councillor MacLeod in. Jim, have you got any questions?
Yes, thanks, convener. It's on the return to sport. First of all, can I congratulate our officers and obviously return to sport and to other areas within this report, to youth work. It's great to see that things have been started up again, and there's more engagement with our young people. It's very positive news. Just regarding our Sport for All, which is under the Return to Sport in the 3rd paragraph. Our Sport for All project engages young people with disabilities and continues to grow following a successful summer programme. Be good to find out a little bit more about that, the numbers of young people with disabilities involved, and the kind of sports or programme of sports that they're undertaking. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I'm looking to Tony or Hugh. Can any of you help me in that one?
Yeah, just for yourself, convener. I'm hoping to bring a full report in active schools engagement over the last year from a Sports Scotland side of it, and that's included that to the next committee, and I'll give you a full detail of what we're actually doing.
Is that okay, Jim?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Now, if we've got no other questions, I've got a move from Councillor McElhenney that the item, the emergency powers item, I'll just read it in full. Refer the item to the next meeting of the full council in recognition that the emergency powers report has not been included and officers' answers have not been addressed. I have not addressed the questions. Now, Councillor McElhenney has moved that. Do we have any support for Councillor McElhenney?
Don't need a second.
There's a chair.
not
No
speak to
seconders
the-
required for the motion.
Do we actually go to a vote then for it, or because he's not got 3 people?
I would ask if there's
Yeah,
any amendment to the motion, and then it would be a vote.
Okay.
Yeah, convener, I'll move the
You can't amend
recommendation
that.
in the report. I don't think there's any need for it to be discussed at full council. The emergency powers report can be circulated, should be circulated to all members of the committee, who will then understand why the 3 elected members who signed the emergency powers and the chief executive did so. And if Councillor McElhenney's got any further questions, he can either raise them with members, or he has the opportunity to ask questions at the full council anyway, because the matter will be on the agenda of the full council by virtue of the fact there'll be a minute of this meeting going to the full council.
Okay, thanks, Convener. I mean, it's a basic traditional
moving to
duty
the
of
vote
a
then.
councillor to know where funds money comes from. The report says there's no financial implications, but it also says
Sorry,
to spend
Chris,
25
do we
grand.
move into a vote? Right, so we're moving to the vote. Right.
Peter, sorry, I was asking. Sorry, I was hoping that question could be answered before we go to the vote.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Yeah, how can you say that we've made a one-off grant of £25,000, which, you know, is the equivalent of 75 kids free school meals, incidentally, but in 5.1 say there's no financial implications? I mean, that's not competent. The money must have came from a budget line. So, you know, I think it's a
we're actually
fair
over
request
into
from a member.
different questions now. I mean, again,
It's a fair request from a member to ask where something was funded from.
Well,
Whether the report says
not when you've
no
actually moved to a
financial
vote, Chris.
implications.
You then
Is it
Convener,
magic?
can I take that?
Is it magic money?
Convener, can I take the
Yes,
question?
you can.
Through you, Convener, the councillor, the 25K's reported in my revenue budget report is an overspend, and it's been contained within the overall community's budget, because obviously the underspend is bigger than that at the moment, but it is reported in my report.
I'm actually keen to move this on. Councillor McCabe, are you not adding anything further?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that the financial implications were spelled out in the emergency powers report, which you signed, Councillor Robertson signed, I signed in the chief executive, and this item is for noting in this report. Hence, there is no decision required in this report. Hence, there is no direct financial implications arising from this report. The financial implications were detailed in the emergency powers report.
Okay, so, but still in all, Chris has asked for this item to be referred to the full council. So again, I'm looking for Anne's guidance. We have got to take that as a motion and an amendment from Councillor McCabe to just note the report. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. So if you're content, I'll move to the roll call
Stephen,
vote.
can I just hold you there? Chris, can you
Yes.
stop uttering under your breath? If you want to switch off, can you switch off your microphone, please?
It's a point of order.
What is the point of order, Chris?
Well, the order here is not competent. What happens is somebody moves the motion, and after that motion's passed, then I would have my motion moved, which you preempted by reading out. So the report would be moved and approved, and then if a member wants to refer an item to the full council, they say so, as I put in the chat. And at that point, it's just a matter of, do you get the requisite number of people or not? You don't have an amendment to a request to full council. Hope that helps assist you.
Thank you, Chris, for that. It does. Anne, guidance?
Yes, I wonder if Councillor McElhenney could assist by referring me to the standing order he is referring to.
Okay, I don't have the standing orders in front of me, but
I do actually think this is correct.
Yeah,
so I'll move the report.
Yep, okay.
Okay, so the report has been moved.
Agreed, and then now I'm moving that that decision is referred to the full council.
Okay. And now we go for a vote. So I have moved the report and Chris has amended it to say it goes to full council. Stephen, you want to come in to?
I've never known a circumstance like that. The only circumstances that I've known when a matter is referred to full council is if we actually have a vote where there is a disagreement, and for example, 5 people vote one way and 4 people vote another, and the 4 people who voted the other way, who lost the vote, refer the matter to full council. I've never seen a circumstance where there's unanimous agreement by the council, because the committee, because nobody moved any alternative motion to amendment to your motion, that you then refer the matter to the full council. And as I said earlier, by virtue of the minute of this meeting being in the full council, any member can raise a question on this item when it comes to the full council. So I just think it's a nonsense.
It is a nonsense, but we've got it now. So
It's not a nonsense because you can only ask questions.
Can we just call? Chris, can you stop speaking under your breath again? Right, so
well,
we've got.
I think it's impertinent for members to say that other members' contributions are nonsense.
Chris, right, so now what we've got is we've got me moving the paper. We've got Chris wanting to refer the paper to the full council. Can we now go to the vote on that?
Convener, through you. So can I clarify, is this
I'm moving the paper.
So it's your motion to move the recommendation of the report,
yes,
as opposed to Councillors McElhenney's amendment that the item is referred to the full council.
Yes.
Yeah, my amendments refer it to the full council because I'm unable to. So I'm just saying the amendment.
Okay.
Refer it to the full council. I'm unable to note it because the emergency powers paper is not attached.
The amendment.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. I'll just ask each member in turn whether they support the motion or the amendment. Provost?
Convener, I need to interject. The motion from the convener was unanimously agreed by the committee. Right, unanimously agreed by the committee. So we're not voting on the motion from the convener. It was unanimously agreed. Councillor McElhenney seems to think there is provision under standing orders to allow him to ask for the matter, irrespective of whether the committee agreed the motion from the convener, which was simply to note the report, to refer the report to the full council. I'm not aware of any provision within standing orders which would allow that, and Ms Sinclair needs to clarify to me whether there is provision in standing orders which would allow that. I've never in all my years been a member of this council been in circumstances like this where a committee unanimously agrees something and then the matter still referred to full council, because the committee has full delegated powers on this matter.
And to answer Chris's point, and the point I moved, nobody moved against.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm very grateful for that clarification, Convener and Councillor McCabe. I'm not aware of a standing order either, and that's why I was seeking clarification from Councillor McElhenney.
Well, I think it's up to the chair to make a ruling.
Right, but I need the legal advice on this. I'm quite happy to go to a vote on it because I don't think Chris is going to get. I don't even know where it goes to the vote now.
Well, all due respect, Convener, we shouldn't go to a vote in something that's not competent. On the basis of the legal advice we've received, it's not a competent motion.
Would you
this committee has full delegated powers.
Stephen, can you? I've already got Chris. Chris, don't you start now as well. I've already got Chris into trouble for speaking over me. Can you please not speak over me as well? And can you please try and bring... This is a relatively straightforward agenda item. Goodness knows what light will be later on. And
yes, thank you very much. Yes, I would echo what Councillor McCabe has said. Councillor McCabe is absolutely correct. This matter will go to the full minutes, the full council, because the minutes will go before the council, and any member has an opportunity to ask questions at that time. So it will go before the full council for discussion.
Right, so it's up to me to make a ruling, and my ruling is that the amendment from Councillor McElhenney is not competent, and therefore we'll move on to other business.
Just for clarity, convener, sorry, because I
No,
never heard
I've made an
this.
amendment. No, I think that's a
I never
ruling
heard
been
it.
made.
I never
Can we
heard it
move?
with signal.
Can we move? Sorry,
It's not.
Chris.
It's not. Sorry, I never heard it. It's not competent to refer it to the full council. You're saying?
Yes, that's the advice
Okay.
I've been given by our
We've
legal
got that
people.
on. We have that on the record.
Oh, thank you. Given the legal advice I've had, that's my decision. Can we move on to the uncontentious item, agenda item number 5, which is Inverclyde's historical links to slavery, the final report, and that's from Alana. Alana, thank you for your report. I'd like you to speak on it. Can I again just reiterate the words I made at the briefing? Thank you for you and all your team's hard work that's been put into this, and I'll put it over to you.
Thanks very much, Convener. Thank you. This report represents a summation of the work of Inverclyde's Historical Links to Slavery Working Group and the group's recommendations for action. The background is that the Policy and Resources Executive Subcommittee asked for a report on the historical links to the slave trade, and this committee later approved a plan that officers form a working group to look at the issue, the group to include council officers, community representatives, and specifically community representatives with Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. In the end, 18 people were invited to join the group, 9 council officers, 9 community representatives, and of those 9, 5 had Black heritage, and 4 of those attended regularly. It was crucial for this project, given the subject matter, that it was a diverse group of voices that were heard, that it was representative, and I believe we achieved that. As the report notes, the group agreed on 4 work streams: a public consultation, an audit of slavery-linked features within the Inverclyde area, work on inclusive curriculum, and also work on community reparations. I won't go into detail on each of these, as the report and the appendices are already very comprehensive, but I will say that the general thrust of the public consultation and the citizens panel, which taken together, we had almost 1,000 responses, with a few exceptions, were that from those who responded, people felt it was important to tell the story of Inverclyde's historical links to the slave trade, and that generally speaking, this should be done in an educational way. There was very little discernible appetite for what one might term radical action, no great desire to change any street names, remove any statues, etc. And in fact, when we got to the listening events, which were a bit more in depth, those were focus groups and allowed us to speak to individuals directly. We did ask the participants what they thought the council should do, if anything, about the features that were found that were linked to slavery. The view was more or less the same. It's important to tell the story, but removing these things would be like erasing history and wasn't required. Taking all of the information back to the working group, a final set of recommendations were agreed upon. These can be found in section 11.1 of the report. I'm sure you'll agree that they're fairly modest proposals. Some have no cost implication at all. Some are work that is more or less already ongoing. As you can see from the report and the appendices, views were somewhat different when it came to the Guruk coat of arms. So we asked the question about the Guruk coat of arms in 2 ways. It was a question which was asked specifically at the listening events, and it also had its own smaller scale consultation within the Guruk area. A link to the survey was sent to ward members, to various community groups, to the community council, and to the 2 high schools in Guruk. We had 205 responses in total, with 50 respondents keen to retain the coat of arms, 77 respondents who felt it should be changed or removed, and 23 respondents who didn't know or weren't particularly clear in their response. The vast majority of the 50 who wanted to retain the coat of arms wanted some kind of information board or interpretation beside each instance of it. There were a few responses that the sable man on the coat of arms is not enslaved. It would require further heraldic research to look into this, and I believe it's fairly doubtful if it could ever be fully confirmed one way or another. The listening events also showed a clear preference that the coat of arms should be removed. For the most part, the listening events, the participants in the listening events found the coat of arms to be offensive and not befitting of Guruk as an area. Again, I'd like to point out the demographics just from the point of view of representation. Each of the 2 listening events had people of colour attending them, and in each of these participants felt that the coat of arms should go. So just a little bit of background about the coat of arms itself. It uses images, or the heraldic term is devices, but basically the pictures on the coat of arms it uses from the Borough seal, which dates from the late 19th century, but it was only actually adopted as a coat of arms in 1954, and then the Guruk Borough was abolished in 1975. It was superseded by Inverclyde Council, so the coat of arms itself was only technically in use for 21 years. The coat of arms belongs to a body which no longer exists, the old Guruk Borough, and therefore it is, and it always will be, the coat of arms of the borough. So there's no sense in which we're trying to change that history. What the group is saying is that it has consulted and it has discovered that many local people, and particularly people of colour, find the coat of arms to be offensive. Officers would work on a case-by-case basis to remove the coat of arms from display where possible and to interpret it in any place where it was found this wasn't possible. And the process for this, or the process that we would adopt for this, is laid out in section 11.2 of the report. As far as we've so far been able to ascertain, the coat of arms is displayed in 5 places across Inverclyde, all included in the report, and all of which should be fairly straightforward to remove if the committee approves this recommendation. And the Watt Institution would be pleased to receive any information from anyone who may know of other instances of the coat of arms on display, but so far these are the 5 that are known to us. The proposal on the Guruk coat of arms from the working group was unanimous. The group recommended the removal, where possible, of the coat of arms, regardless of whether further research is able to reveal more about the provenance and whether or not the disabled man is actually enslaved. It's such an arresting image, and the Darachs, whose crest it is, are so irrevocably linked with the slave trade that it's hard not to make this assumption. Our young person representative on the group, who is also black, said that seeing the coat of arms for the first time made her feel hurt and unwelcome in her own area. And that really summed up how the working group members, particularly those with black heritage, all felt about the coat of arms. An email was also received by ward councillors from a black constituent making very similar points. In conclusion then, I'm asking for members to accept the recommendations of the working group, to approve that the group's reparatory plan can be taken forward, and to approve further work taking place to remove the Guruk Borough coat of arms from display where practicable. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks for that, Alana, and thanks very much for the briefing you've done as well. My only comment was, one of the comments from the briefing was from Councillor Quinn, was from Lynn, with regard to her time as the secretary or chair of the Guruk Community Council, and the very fact that they actually used it as their letterhead. Now, I take it that is still the case, and I was just wondering, obviously we'll wait for the conversation and the comments, but I was just wondering if although we couldn't probably do it as a recommendation, if we could possibly write to them and ask them would they like a schools competition to redesign their letterhead. I mean, I think that came quite clearly from the briefing from Lynn. But with that, I'll wait to the end and we can sum that up. So we'll open it to questions now. And the first question I've got is from Chris McElhenney. Chris.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Thanks, Alana. It was a really enjoyable report. I think a lot of work went into it, and although I would have liked to have seen a lot more people take part in the consultation, I think it is actually quite representative when you expand the numbers out to the wider community. I mean, this has been a subject of debate for a few. When it first, I suppose, got quite public recognition, I had sought the advice from someone who was the Black, Asian and minority ethnic convener of the Scottish National Party, who was someone who, as a descendant of enslaved people, his view on it was that he personally didn't see the character as a slave. He thought it actually represented, you know, sort of demigod Neptune, a freed person. And I guess the fact that there are various iterations where that character's yellow or blue, green in some occasions, black and white, I guess maybe could go along to that. And he ultimately suggested that the Lord Lion would need to be the arbitrator on that, but the Lord Lion's never going to make an arbitrary decision on heraldry to say that a coat of arms is racist or not racist, because, you know, there potentially would be a substantial amount of coat of arms then would be deemed as such. I'm broadly content with the recommendations in the report. I think that there is a recognition that, you know, you cannot just say that history is no longer history, and you're quite right to say that the Gourock borough no longer exists, but people in Gourock still very much see Gourock as its own unique town with its own unique history, and there is absolutely, perhaps, you know, as you know, through the demographs, there is people that have proud Gourock traditions that don't want to see the coat of arms removed, and I think that's why, as I had suggested, and Councillor Clothy's just suggested there, I think some sort of schools competition, it might not even need to be called a coat of arms, because that might be seen as a bit incendiary in 2022, but I think some sort of schools competition to design a new logo, a new emblem, a new coat of arms for Gourock, with the school children of Gourock, an exercise that draws on the past to see where we've came from, but fits into our, you know, strategic objectives as a council in terms of where we want to go, to create the sort of society that everyone's welcome in. What would that look like if you wanted to make it a representative emblem, logo, coat of arms? And I think that really would be a good competition. So I would support the recommendations, but I would ask the committee to consider, you talk of other places the coat of arms are used. I was the chairman of Gourock Amateurs for many years, you know, football team that was some 50 or 60 years old. The Gourock coat of arms was the team's badge. There's now there's another the Gourock team, two chaps are working really hard to I think they're under 20 still, and that's their badge. So by us saying that we should remove it, you could perhaps say that that's because, well, we wouldn't ask for it to be removed if it wasn't a racist symbol. So the fact that we want to remove it, I guess we are inferring it is at least perceived as racist. So then I would be a bit concerned that we would then have a, you know, potential that we've got youth clubs, voluntary organisations, sports clubs, football teams that have spent a lot of money on bags, strips, 2 sets of strips, 3 sets of strips, tracksuits, etc. And, you know, they then have a badge on that strip that people might say, well, that's racist because the council's made the decision that should be removed. So I would like to see if we could perhaps come up with a small grant fund. If there are organisations that, you know, we would as a committee perhaps endorse their applications to the Grant for Voluntary Organisations Committee to replace those strips and those training paraphernalia, etc. If perhaps the outcome of said school competition of the committee does want to proceed with that, perhaps they would want to, you know, create new strips, new uniforms with that badge on it. Because, you know, personally speaking, from my time as the Gourock chairman of the representative council of the town was telling us, you know, the badge on your strip's racist. You know, you could end up actually with some, you know, it might sound, you know, pedantic, but you could end up with some compliance issues in terms of your registration and your compliance with, you know, the millions upon millions of subsections that the SFA require these days in terms of tolerance. You know, I think it's flagged up to them that there's a team playing with a badge, they've got tracksuits with a badge that has been deemed racist. You know, they could end up getting themselves in trouble, and it's not cheap to, you know, you're talking £500 a set of strips, times 2, times 3, and all the tracksuits, and people fundraise quite a lot, particularly depending on their age, if they don't fall into the subsidy and the grants age. So I would hope that we could perhaps look favourably on putting some grant funding in place for that. And the convener's already alluded to, you know, a competition for a letterhead. I think we should maybe go a bit bigger than that, than, you know, endorse a school, because, you know, we're acting as a communities committee, obviously not the education committee, but I think we should be endorsing, you know, a competition of Guruk school children to design a new fit for purpose emblem, logo, coat of arms, whatever form of words we determine it should be referred to as. I think we should go ahead with that competition, and whether you're a local business that wants to use it, a community council that wants to use it as your letterhead, sports clubs that want to use it as your badge, or if we want to replace it on the buildings that we'll be taking the historic coat of arms off of, I think that's what we should do. I know that's quite wordy, but I think it is concise enough to express what I'd like the committee to approve as an addition to 3.3, convener.
Thanks for that, Chris. I'm a tad confused, but I'll try and sort that out. I'll let other people come in with their questions. First of all, Chris Curley.
Thank you, convener. I was just looking at the report again as well, listening to Chris there. I think it's, I'd reiterate the comments made at the briefing. I think it's a very good report, and it's amazing when you actually look at these things, how interlinked all the trade was at that point in time with the slave trade. I think my question is just mostly on just what we do if we decide to remove the coat of arms from the Guruk buildings and other Guruk facilities. Where would we put them? Would these be kept within the what institution? And I'm just wondering, I know there's a lot of materials stored in the town buildings. I think I was alluded to that there was a coat of arms found when we did a thing there. Is there a case that maybe we should be looking to see what other elements we have within the council ownership that are maybe not necessarily captured by the Watt institution, but are maybe within the municipal buildings, to see if we should be trying to locate these things and maybe cataloguing these for the future, because I'm presuming there's a lot of stuff there that we could possibly be making more use of as well. That's probably slightly strange, but my main point is just, are these elements going to be kept within our historic collection?
Alana?
Through you, convener, yes, Councillor Curley, there's definitely the opportunity to do that through the Watt institution. What I would say is that obviously we're a wee bit short of space in the Watt institution, so we probably wouldn't take down the coat of arms and then display several different versions of it. However, what we would probably seek to do is choose a representative sample and perhaps have that in the Watt institution with appropriate interpretation beside it, so that people can see what was the Borough coat of arms and you know the reasons for that, and also the reasons for its removal. So it wouldn't be out on display in public areas with no interpretation beside it, but you would be able to get the full story at the Watt institution.
Okay, Chris. Can I move on to Natasha? Natasha?
Thanks, convener. Yes, mine was just about the Guruk coat of arms as well. I think that when you look at the number of under 25s that took part, that's a huge number of young people that have taken part, and the message is consistent through what is being said there. The thing that I'm quite considerate of is we don't want to be seen as denying our history. So I think that having things like plaques that explain what these coat of arms mean when we don't actually fully know ourselves, because there's no record of it, if there could be a bit of work done around why the disabled man or who the disabled man's meant to be on it, that would help bring a bit of clarification. But I don't know if the people that designed that or part of that are still around, if they're still contactable, are they in the local area. But 1954 is quite recent to have those attitudes kind of coming through. And I know that I'm a slightly different generation, but it'd be quite interesting if we could try and get that information. In regards to the wider work, I think we do need to commend the amount of work that's went into this, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that gets brought forward, especially with the feedback that things like history walk should be done. I think slavery, unfortunately, is something that was quite prominent linked to Inverclyde, and that rather than denying or hiding that, we need to not celebrate it, but rather be honest about where we came from. So thanks, Alana, to you and your team for doing that. And if we could get maybe a bit of work back on this, on how that's going to progress and how we're going to do this, that would be really helpful for me.
Okay, Alana. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, convener. As the person that moved the original motion at the Policy and Resources Executive Subcommittee that led to this process, I felt it I should comment on it. I mean, I've obviously attended the briefing last week, and I thought it was a first-class briefing and excellent contributions from everybody there. I think this is a first-class piece of work. It's obviously taken a bit longer than we had hoped, but that's because it's been done in the middle of a pandemic, so that's quite understandable. And I think everybody who has participated in the working group and carried out the various pieces of work are to be congratulated. I mean, I think it is an excellent piece of work. I think it's worthy of nomination for a Cosla Excellence Awards, to be perfectly honest, as well, in terms of the quality of the work. And I think we've got very sound recommendations that are here before us. But I think that they do obviously raise practical issues, and some of those practical issues have been highlighted in some of the contributions that have been made so far. And I don't think we should be rushing into any sort of decisions today, to be perfectly honest, around competitions for schools or funding for replacement strips, etc., etc. I think we should ask officers in the subgroup to look at the practical issues that arise from the recommendations and bring forward a further report in due course, just how we might address those practical issues, because I don't think we want to jump in with both feet at this point. And I think it is important about how we sort of recognise our past, but with the same token sort of make reparation for it. And I know it's been raised by me and others around the Dardanelles window and all the work that was put into actually producing that, to obviously recognise the sacrifices that were made at Gallipoli, and there was certainly no intention on the part of those who fundraised for that window to cause any offence to anybody. But there are sensitivities obviously around how we would deal with that particular window. So I think there are a number of issues that need to be thought through, and I think practical proposals, including in the issue of whether there should be some sort of coat of arms or alternative for Gourock, what the issue, and it will be a decision obviously for Gourock Community Council what they decide to do in terms of the letterhead, and equally it will be individual decisions for other organisations who use the Gourock coat of arms. It's not for the council to tell them that they can't use the Gourock coat of arms anymore. But if there are practical issues arising from it, I think we should examine them and bring back a further report, rather than go into any great debate and discussion around individual issues at this point in time.
Yeah, thanks for that, Stephen. I think my comment, if you remember back, I wasn't ordering them to have a schools competition. What I suggested is we write to the Gourock Community Council and ask, would they like us to help with that if they did do that. And there is precedent on that, because I'm sure the Carbo Bay and Greenock West actually done that, and I'm sure their letterhead was designed by one of their schools. I think it was actually probably designed by St Columbus. Not too sure.
No, I agree with you. It's a perfectly sensible suggestion. I just think, obviously, that, as you all agree, that we need to do these sort of things in partnership and discussion, and it'd be better if we look at all of these issues and round and maybe have a further report back and see what the implications are for the council directly.
Okay, is there any further questions? Elizabeth, sorry. Elizabeth.
Jim, can I apologise? I've lost access to my keyboard, which is regularly happening to me on WebEx, so I'm doing the wee raised hand as an alternative, so I do apologise for that. This really has been done. A lot of work done by the group. But I'm going to it's kept me up at night, I have to say, because there's a question that's burning in my brain and I can't get away from it. We completely support that we remove the coat of arms, no question about that at all. But I don't know how we get to the point where there's a heraldic representation that's been registered and lodged that we don't have any context or record of meaning for. And I don't even know I'm not criticising our officers necessarily in terms of that, but for something to be lodged as a heraldic representation, I can't imagine that there's not a record that goes along with it as to how we get there. I'm looking at page 49 in the papers that we've got, and it says in the 1950s the provost applied and gave some information at that point. So what were the historical documents that were used to back up the meaning at that point? But really, you know, it's the bottom line of it is if the notion of the man represented in the coat of arms being a slave is what was in their mind at the time, that's what we have to go on, and therefore we remove. I'm more convinced actually even by the young person who spoke to us at the briefing, who said that she just feels that it's wrong when she walks past it, and I don't want anyone to feel like that in our community. But the question I've got is how do you get to this point in the first place, you know, with an official heraldic representation?
Alana, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, through you, Convener. Councillor Robertson, the information I have, although the coat of arms was only adopted in 1954, the pictures on the coat of arms predate that, and they go back to the late 19th century, the old Guruk Borough seal, and the sable man is represented there. The research that there is, and there is very little research, the research that I have seen also makes the assumption that the sable man was enslaved. That half of the shield, if you like, relates, as it says in the report, it's the Darach crest, and the original Duncan Darach was a slaver, and I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. Made his fortune in the West Indies, and then came back to Guruk, bought the lands of Guruk from the Stuarts of Castlemilk, and it's his crest, it's that family's crest that is on the borough seal, and then later the coat of arms. So that certainly explains why there is a sable man. You must assume from that it comes from his time in Jamaica. Whether or not the man himself is actually enslaved, as I say, no one can say for sure, and I think it's just something that's probably lost in the mists of time. I'm not even sure that further heraldic research would be able to say for definite. You know, there are no heraldic experts within the team at the Watt Institution. It's definitely something we would have to go outside for. It would be possible to do it, but I think, as you said yourself, the young person representative and the views that we have had from people of colour are that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if this man is enslaved or not enslaved. It's the arresting visual of it. It's what it looks like, and particularly the way it looks at the moment with no explanation and no, you know, people just see the visual, and that's what makes the Guruk coat of arms different from every other aspect that we looked at in terms of what is linked to slavery, because obviously, you know, you'll see the length of the audit. There's a huge number of features within the Inverclyde area that are linked to slavery. The area was built on that sort of you know, the transatlantic you know, the triangular trade, so there's no getting away from that. But you know, on every other aspect, people felt that education interpretation was the way forward. I think because the coat of arms is just so visual, and it's what people see, and when you look at the coat of arms, it's quite shocking. And I know that various people in the working group showed the coat of arms to their friends and family, and you know, individuals who'd never seen it before, and really the response was fairly unanimous. People were shocked because everybody made the same assumption. So I think at the end of the day, it probably doesn't matter if the man was enslaved or not. You know, that is the assumption that people make when they see that coat of arms, and that is why offence is taken, you know, by people of colour. And that may not, you know, cannot say that all people of colour would feel the same way. We can only you know, talk about who we spoke to, but that was the unanimous response of those people that we spoke to.
Thanks, Alana. Elizabeth, was that okay?
Yep, brilliant. Thanks very much again for going over that, Alana. Sorry for making you. It's just, it would be lovely for our decision to be backed up by an irrefutable piece of evidence as well, but we don't have it. So, but I think it doesn't change how I feel about the decision.
Okay, Councillor MacLeod, Jim, are you there? You got any questions on this?
Yeah, Convener, not so much a question, just a couple of comments, just to welcome a report. It's very, very good. I'm sorry I missed the briefing last week. Well, accounts from my colleagues said it was a very, very good briefing, and can I congratulate Alana and her staff in doing so well and bringing this to us. it's a very sad time in our history. You know, that so much great wealth was made from sugar, tobacco, and the likes of cotton on the misery of slaves taken from Africa. I think it's difficult. We can't rewrite our history, but we can certainly learn going forward. Unfortunately, it's still modern day slavery in various parts of the world, and hopefully that can be stopped through different means. But I think I totally agree. I think education, that's fundamental to most things in life, and I think that's the way forward. I know that some of our schools already have studied the slave trade. In fact, some of the councillors in the old Ward 1 may remember us going to New York Primary some years ago, where they did an excellent presentation on the slave trade. So I think that's the way forward, and I would agree as to the sort of things we're talking about, walks and obviously through the schools. So again, I'd just like to commend Alana and her team for all they've done here. Thank you.
Okay, Jim, thanks for that. I can't see any further questions, so it just goes to the recommendations. Now, I'm acutely aware that I think Councillor McElhenney, I had done a suggestion with regard to writing to the Gourock Community Council and see if they wished us to facilitate, they might not, but to see if they wish us to facilitate a competition to change their letterhead. Now, we cannot change the coat of arms. The coat of arms is a coat of arms, that it's no longer in use. But if Councillor McElhenney, oh, he's back on, I can see him now. If he's got something to move, can I ask he moves it now?
I'm happy if the committee is happy to endorse that. In terms of what Councillor McCabe said, initiatives such as a schools competition, the logistics of that are explored and brought back to us in a future report setting out how officers, I don't even actually know, to be honest with you. We would need to refer that to the Education Committee for their consent. But I think that should be included in the sort of logistical follow-up report that Councillor McCabe said, so setting out what potential options are, as opposed to saying right now we're having a competition, because then I guess that gives members that represent Gourock and indeed other members time to maybe liaise with officers to help form what that report should look like. And could I just ask one question that one point I'm not clear on? On Gourock municipal buildings, so obviously it's very nice stone cornicing that the coat of arms has been made with, and I'm aware that there's only, I think 2 stone cornicers in Scotland. It's as ridiculous a dying trade as that. I think maybe in that report setting out the logistics, this would maybe need, because that's, very front facing building that's had a lot of money spent on renovating it. And I don't think anyone would want to see just, a big cement patch up there. So, but it's obviously in the most visible point, arguably, of Gourock. So maybe like some more information. Is that going to be something that would need a bit of money to try and remove, because it would need to be replaced with something else? Or are you proposing keeping that? And I guess if you want to keep that, it kind of defeats the purpose of removing everything else.
Alana, do you wish to comment?
Yes, through you, convener. No work has been done so far in respect of this. Obviously, we're waiting for the committee decision on it. However, we would certainly work with our colleagues in property services to ensure that any removal of the coat of arms that went ahead would be done in a sympathetic way to the location of the coat of arms, and particularly, as you say, the one on the Gourock municipal buildings. We would work with property experts on the best way to remove that.
Okay, Chris, and that will be the same for the Dardanelles window. We'll get the contact for the Argyles Association, and you can have discussions with them of whether or not it's appropriate to remove it or whether it's appropriate to put a plaque of explanation beside it. I can't see any further questions. Can we move to the recommendations? Now, given that what Councillor McCabe said with regard to a further report back to look at the implementations of what we can do we therefore get agreement on that? Great. Okay, thank you, everybody. And can we move along to agenda item number 6, which is an update on the swimming for the under-16s and gym membership. I'm looking to see, Ruth, are you taking this one?
Yes, Convener, I'll take this one. So this is an update on the swimming for under-16s, and I'll deal with that matter first, and then we'll go to the gym membership. So members will remember that as part of the budget setting process, the Council in 2020 agreed a saving of £100,000 from the £180,000 for free swimming, and that saving was taken. Since then, there's been a lot of debate at committee and a lot of work undertaken. The significant pieces of work are that IL charge per swim rather than being given a block grant, and also that there's a card system entry to see the demographics of usage using the pools, and a full report was brought back to the previous committee looking at the broad demographics of usage. The committee still has an issue in that the saving of £100,000 has been taken, and to continue with free swimming and in its current format isn't an option without making some key decisions. So the recommendation in this report is that in order to take forward swimming within the budget, that 4.2.3 option 3 is proposed. So that's every term time swim subsidised by £2, which gives a cost of £2.60 for swimming for under-16s. And it's to be noted that's on the current charges. Of course, charges change every year. There would be a 2-hour slot for free swimming on Saturday and Sunday from 9 till 11. A further subsidy of £1 per swim during school holiday periods to give a reduced price, and also IL would have family swim packages. It's recognised that there may be a reluctance from the committee to pursue option 3, and if this is the case, then in paragraph 5.4, it outlines options that the committee might want to consider if it wants to keep free swimming going for another year, and it would have a budget pressure of about £40,000. And the suggestion is that the committee contains this by looking to the Community Grants Fund to get that money. The use of gyms. So there was a request made by Councillor Chris McElhaney at the last Education and Communities Committee to look at the financial impacts of free use of gyms for secondary aged pupils, and for that to be referred to the members' budget working group. And that was in light of the very positive feedback for the usage over the summer of Fund 2021. Officers have been able to progress that very quickly using the Health and Wellbeing Grant. And so basically we've used the Recovery Fund and made a bid for £15,000 to give a pilot for use of free gyms for 12 to 16-year-olds. That will run from the 3rd of January 2022 until the 1st of June 2022. And the proposal is that we would evaluate the impact of this and bring a further report back to the committee. I'm sure there will be some questions and happy to take them.
Ruth, thank you very much. I noticed that we've lost Councillor Wilson. Now, given that this is an important item, would you bear with me in order that we can try and get Councillor Wilson back? Can we give him a 3-minute quick adjournment to see if we can get Councillor Wilson back? Is that agreed?
Convener, through you, one of the committee officers has just made contact with Councillor Wilson, and he has confirmed that he's not returning to the meeting.
Okay. That's fine. Thanks for that, and that allows us to press ahead. Now, before we go into questions on this, I think given what we've heard before at the member budget working groups and what we've heard from other parties, I think that the idea what Ruth has actually outlined in 5.4 might bring a lot of succour to members of this committee, in so much that we allow the free swimming to go ahead and it will be virtually up to, bearing in mind there is still that saving on the table, but this would allow free swimming to go ahead the other year, and it would be up to the next council really to decide whether or not that's a decision they wish to reverse in future, or whether or not they wish to go ahead with it in future. So if you crave my indulgence at the end, that's what I'll be inclined to move. But I'll let questions go on first of all to see what the mood of the audience is really. And the first question is from Stephen. Stephen?
Yeah, it wasn't so much a question, more of a comment, convener. I think the reality is that we all agreed unanimously as a council a budget saving in this area. It wasn't a budget saving that we took lightly, but I think when obviously the implications of it came to light, there was reluctance on the part of the committee in general to want to do away completely with free swimming, and that's why we've been going round the houses to some extent in terms of this issue. But I think if the wish of the committee is to continue with free swimming as it stands at this point in time, and given what I'm now told the approximate cost is 120,000, which does represent a saving on the original budget that we'd set aside of, I think, £60,000. So there's still a saving being achieved. Given that there is that shortfall, to me, I think that the committee has a decision that it could take today, which would be to continue with free swimming and to fund that budget pressure from the Communities Grants Fund as is the option outlined in the report.
Okay, thanks for that, Stephen. I'll allow Chris Curley to come in first of all. Chris?
Thank you, convener. I certainly welcome the comments made about keeping free swimming. It's one of the concerns we had when we obviously acknowledged that the cut was made. It was because I suppose that there wasn't the visibility and transparency in what we were actually what we're spending. I think it's important that we've now got the spend per swim deal agreement with Untitled Leisure, so we've got that transparency. We also now have the information we've got from the cards, which has identified that there's the swimming has been used by almost by every part of every sort of every part of what they call society, every what they call the cost of the swimming isn't putting off, and it's also not the situation. It's not, there doesn't seem to be any other barriers to people who have got a lower income from using the swimming. So it's good that we've actually seen that there's a consistency of approach to all levels of income within Inverclyde. What I would like to see is, I'm not so sure that we should be maybe, obviously the Community Grants Fund is an item that's not within our purview to what you call it, proposed this committee to do that, but I certainly would maybe just leave open that we look at it within the general budget process we're going out for next year and identifying it as a budget pressure and then looking to see how we can fund it for the year. I would think it would be maybe, I do agree, I say I wanted to keep free swimming. I also think it's maybe if you had made the decision to remove it, it may be a bit presumptuous because the fact is we're then looking at how we'd maybe look at free gym access and things like that. And there's maybe a piece of work to be doing in this regard, looking forward, depending what the pilot of the gym membership shows, whether or not there's actually a way of maybe combining both schemes, etc. So I think I'd say my view is we should keep it as it is at the moment. We should retain free swimming and look with interest at the pilot and see whether or not we can get a combined system going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Stephen, you want to come back in?
Yeah, we just want to clarify. Chris said that it wasn't in the providence of this committee to decide to allocate the Community Grants Fund. That's not true. This is the parent committee for the Grants to Voluntary Organisation Subcommittee, so it's perfectly within the remit of this committee to make that decision.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I was going to add that at the end. I'm looking for any other. Liz, did you have your hand up? Or is it back down again?
Well, I did, but Chris and I are of one mind on this, so he covered everything I was going to say.
Okay, good for that. I'll allow Natasha to come in next. Natasha?
Thanks, convener. Yes, I've just got a couple of points on this. So First one, taking out with the community fund. I can understand the logic behind that because that's where traditional under-16 sports fund would come from. So I can totally appreciate why it might come from that. The other thing was, and I think I've already said this before, could we maybe look at whether this could be an anti-poverty fund measure? But I'm very aware that that would then lead to means testing, and we don't want to restrict the number of young people that can access this. And my final point is just we need to look at creating with our young people good and healthy relationships through balancing exercise and healthy living, and by providing free gym memberships and swimming. That can help young people become more active, but I think we need to maybe look at people who may not have healthy relationships with exercise or eating, and actually looking at how that can be put into life skills in school. I'm sure schools already do a bit of work around this, but I just want to make sure that we're safeguarding young people who maybe, for whatever reason, might have unhealthy relationships with exercise and in ways like using the gym. I don't know if that can maybe be taken away and looked at in a wider sense, and I don't know if maybe a later item might touch on this as well.
Ruth, you wish to comment?
Yes, so just firstly on the fact that this committee does have the ownership, for want of a better word, for the community fund. Any other funding process or any other place you go for funding needs to go through P&R. So we can only, the committee has has governance over its own funding. That's why officers have recommended the community grants fund. What I would say is that...
Can I ask you quickly to comment on Councillor Curley's point about, and Chris, you can tell me if I'm wrong about that, about taking it off, not being specific on you do it, but just putting it on to an unspecified budget or, you know, an undisclosed amount at the end of the year, or a surplus at the end of the year type of thing, if I've got that right. You can comment on that.
I was mostly just saying that I'm noting the previous that we'll also have an underspend from last year, which is also going to go back into the pot at the end of this year. Obviously, I take the point that there is if it is within the committee to look at the overall budget of the committee, could we via the amount from one part of the committee into the community into community grants to cover it? I think though, looking at it, I think I'd be more content that we would increase the 80,000 to 120,000, take it as a budget pressure and look at it within the agreeing the budget going forward at this year. And might be at that during the budget negotiations we decide to take it from the community grants fund, but just leave that open at this point in time.
Yeah, can you comment on that, Ruth? Because that seems a bit messy for me.
The committee can't make a decision to provide a provision that it hasn't got the budget for. So it would have to refer back to P&R or the members' budget working group for the budget process. So basically, we can't go in on a wing and a prayer hoping that there'll be an underspend somewhere. The Director of Finance would not allow that to happen. So we cannot make a decision in this committee that we have not got the budget for unless we refer it to another committee or process.
Okay, thanks for that, Ruth. Natasha, did I ask your question as well?
Mine was just about making sure that the wider health and wellbeing is looked at as part of this, just because there may be some young people that have unhealthy attitudes like over exercising, for example.
So through you, convener, to answer that question, yes, and we've got lots of different types of initiatives, either through the schools themselves or through active schools, to look at relationships with active lifestyles. It doesn't always have to be a sport. It's encouraging active lifestyles, and you'll remember the very first representation on the free swimming was saying actually there is some research that says that actually there is no absolute gain to giving free swimming for swimming for free on impact on healthy lifestyles. It would be more linked with poverty measures, but actually there's no discernible link between an increase in healthy lifestyles and what is given away for free.
Okay, Natasha.
Yes, no, I completely appreciate that, and I just want to say I'm not against the scheme. I think it's a great idea. It's just being mindful of others.
Okay, thanks, Natasha. Can I invite Tommy in? Tommy?
Yep, thanks very much, convener. I agree in principle with 5.4 and the recommendation, as you've said already, convener. Just one concern regarding the impact on the community budget, community fund budget. How does that mean, Ruth, at the moment? And I know we'll have a budget coming up, and all these things can get into the mix as well. That 40,000, well, now we can't allocate that to somebody else in the next financial year. Obviously, there's winners and losers, so if we put it to the free swimming, then we can't put it to maybe a community group out in the community. Is that where we're going with this?
So there would, through you, convener, there'll be less money in the total pot for the subgroup to make the decision as to the allocation. So the overall budget would be less. So depending on the decisions of the GTVO committee, there would be less money to allocate out. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Ruth. Thanks, convener.
But Tommy, this would be a one-off. The decision on free school swimming for going on forever will still need to be taken. So what we're virtually doing here is just doing a one-off. Yeah. We're not actually at this point.
Okay, I just want to clarify.
Okay, thank you. Chris McElhenney.
Thanks, convener. It's a useful report in terms of informing views on that. I suppose my starting point would be that previous budgetary decisions don't necessarily bound us going forward. You'll recall that the administration made the budgetary decision to close Ravenscraig Sports Centre one year, but in reflection, the following year decided actually that was perhaps not the best decision, and it's quite a successful facility now. So similarly, a decision was made in the past to make a saving on free swimming by reducing access. It doesn't mean that a member is forbidden to say, well, actually, in reflection and looking at the information from officers, I think when I put this into the round, it's something that I value and it should be a priority. And just noting on the Further Scotland duty, so I mean, we wouldn't class this as a major strategic decision, but I think some members do, I suppose, put those principles and the methodology through, simple decisions. And I mean, does this decision, does the recommendation here reduce inequalities of outcome? No. I would argue that it increases inequalities of outcome, because we know that the pandemic has particularly exacerbated impact on people from low incomes, people in areas of deprivation. We know that health's a big factor going forward and recovering better. We're talking here about the successful pilot of the free gyms, and I think then it's a tad counterintuitive to be saying, well, there's really good feedback here. I heard Councillor Alfeld the other day talking about, who is our council sports champion, talking about the really great feedback he got on the free gyms. And I think that, the complexity of all the interconnected issues that cause our deprivation, I think creating a healthier Inverclyde has to be seen as a long-term aim. And then obviously there will be a save and return, hopefully, in years to come through, the impacts that has on employability, drug and addiction services, mental health services, poor health equality, people living, the last 10, 15, 20 years of their life quite unhealthy, and the impact that has on the health and social care partnership. These things are all interconnected. So I think in reflection that for me it was a wrong decision to make a reduction to the free swimming policy. I think it's probably alongside our waivers and grant schemes. It is a policy that people across Scotland are envious of. It's not just our school estates and our teachers and our music and our attainment. I think people are really envious when they hear a policy such as this, and I just think that the principle of universalism to avoid the mean testing hassle is important, and it should be a principle that universally children do get access to free sport, they do get access to free swimming, and I think when we've got the ability to protect something, we should. So I would like us to maintain the status quo, maintain free access to swimming as it currently states, and the budget pressure that will create should be referred to the the members' budget working group, as has previously happened in years when pressures are created at committee, with the view that the members' budget working group obviously would try and form a consensus on forming a report that would have to go to the Policy and Resources Committee, or indeed, as time is obviously limited, perhaps straight to the full council.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. I'll take that for at the end of the meeting if that's you moving something separately. We'll move on to Elizabeth. Oh, sorry, Lynn Quinn first and then Elizabeth. Lynn?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just got a quick question. I noticed you're taking the money from the community grants fund, so I'm just trying to establish. I know previously we had GTVO, which included the funding for their community groups plus the sports subsidy. I'm sure this has been raised before. I know Councillor Alfield has raised it a number of times as well. Is there a clear distinction within that fund of how much is allocated to sport and how much is allocated to actually other community groups? It's just I'm conscious that we ask for money from there, and I think if it's sport it has to stay on that side, and if it's community groups another, you know, so that one is not sort of subsidising the other. So that's probably my first question, is that actually distinctively separated out so that we know it's coming from the right area? So generally, you know, absolutely support free swimming, any form of free access for kids to make sure they are active is more than welcome. I wish we could afford to pay for every sport to be free in Inverclyde. I'm sure everybody would agree, but obviously in times of budget cuts we kind of need to prioritise. So in terms of you know, gym access or us choosing, it's been a long time since I've been under 16, so I'm just conscious that we are potentially sitting at a committee choosing which sport and which activity our young people will have free access to, when actually their choices might be completely different. So I'm just, you know, inquiring, has there been conversation, has there been consultations with our young people to say, actually this is the sort of activity that if it was free I would really love to be engaged in? Thanks. I think you're on mute, Jim.
All right, sorry, I put myself on mute. I was just saying there, I'll let Ruth come in first and maybe either Hugh or Tony can help out.
So I can see Tony wants to come in about the community grant, and I know that the grants are separated, not an amount separated out as my understanding, but they're actually separated out as to what's allocated to sport and what's allocated to communities. Whether or not there's been any conversations about what young people would like to see. Not to any depth. It's tended to be around the swimming, and certainly it's been a feedback from the gym. But we certainly could take that forward, and we have a pupil representation group that we meet with regularly, and we could put that on the agenda and ask them to perhaps join us in some work to take that forward for the future, Councillor Quinn. And I'll hand over to Tony for further on the community grants.
Yeah, through you, convener, just I suppose clarity around the community grants. We do, the grants are now amalgamated, but at the moment one is not restricting, like there isn't too much of one overtaking the other. They're all considered together because a lot of organisations will, a lot of the funding they're requesting covers both community and also sports waivers as well. So at the moment we're taking it from the full fund. So we're not saying half of it needs to go to this and half of it needs to go to that, other than the ring fencing that we already do in terms of play schemes and also events for community groups. So, but that's the only, at the moment, that's all we do.
Okay. Yeah, the
okay?
that answers questions. I still think that poses a bit of a problem to actually be transparent exactly how we fund sport and how much we actually contribute to sport. So it would actually be good to see that separated out. But that's just my personal opinion. It's not really any sort of recommendation. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. I'm going to ask Jim McLeod if he's got any questions on this yet. Jim?
Yeah, just questions and comment. As some of you all know, I first wrote about free swimming in the early 2000s, and I'm glad that later on the council took it on board and approved as a policy. I think free swimming's been a great thing. It's very positive. It keeps young people healthy. It gets them doing positive things. It keeps them fit. My concern is if we start charging even parts of it, can we really call it free swimming anymore? It wouldn't really be free swimming, would it? Albeit I know that there is the discussion about still having 2 time slots, Saturday and Sunday for 2 hours. Albeit what I would say is if you did go ahead at all at any time in the future, I think 9 o'clock start is probably too early on that Saturday, Sunday morning for many youngsters. So I'd guard against that. But my fear is that, you know, anybody, and remembering the deprivation levels we have in Inverclyde, that people are going to lose out in this, because whilst it might be okay for some parents, some families to be able to afford £1.60 or £2, whatever the charge would be towards a swim, there are many people there that are unemployed or on low incomes. And if you've got more than one child, you might have 2 or 3 children. Then that all mounts up, and it's just a cost that it might not be able to pay. So I think we have to be guarded against that. I just wondered, we've got Live Active, which, as you know, is a relationship that we've had for many years between the council and the health board. I just wondered, you know, if there's been any thought given to perhaps going to the health board and saying, well, this keeps youngsters healthy, fitter, and hopefully to get into swimming, that would encourage them to swim for forever and a day. So it does have an impact on the health service if we can keep youngsters and other people fitter and healthy. I just wondered if an approach could be made to them for some funding towards this. But no, I think I agree. I would like to keep it as it is. I know we've got funding pressures. I understand that, but I think at the end of the day, this is an investment in our young people. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Lynn. I'm going to let Elizabeth come in here, but I would just remember, Jim, the mood of the audience is that they want to continue with free swimming. So we've got an option of Ruth put in 5.4 how we could do that. What there seems to be argument is now is whether or not that's acceptable or not. I think it's possibly like the cleanest way for this committee. I think the problem is if you bat it back to the P&R or the member budget working group, they might assess this against something else just now, and you might not get the same reply. But I'll let Elizabeth in first of all. I'm using my chair there a wee bit. Elizabeth.
No, not at all, Jim. That's actually quite helpful in terms of the question that I'm going to kind of pose. Is I can understand that it's really straightforward to take the 40,000 from the £300,000 of the community grants, but £40,000 is quite a chunk of that money. And might it be more manageable to take it from somewhere else, just in the wider budget thing? I'm kind of going back to I'm really reiterating the point that Chris Curley made initially, that maybe just from the point of view of the quantum, the kind of scale of the money in relation to the community fund versus the scale of the money in relation to the wider budget, that would be my only sort of challenge back in terms of the route that we go down here. I'm happy that the mood of the committee is to continue doing this. I thought I was going to have more of a fight on in terms of that, but that's the question that remains for me.
Okay, I'll let Stephen come in first of all, and then I'll get Ruth to perhaps reply, and depends what Stephen's saying as well. Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, it's just to follow that up point. So Ruth is the corporate director with by far the biggest budget in the council, albeit obviously there's community side of her budget and education side of her budget. So she's by far the biggest budget in the council. So the challenge to Ruth posed by that question is, on the basis of the desire of the committee to continue with free swimming, if you don't fund it from the the community fund, where else in your huge budget are you going to fund it from?
There you go, Ruth, that's a challenge for you.
Through you, Convener, most of my budget is ring fenced, so most of my budget will be spent on teachers and also statutory duties. The reason we've gone to the Communities Fund is because members will remember a time when, as a committee, we scraped through for delivering the services we normally deliver by pounds and pence, I would have to say. Now there is some COVID recovery fund in the mix, but most of my budget I just can't touch. So although I have the biggest budget in the council, I've probably got the smallest budget that I actually have access to because most of mine is ring fenced for resources linked to education.
I suppose that answers that, Stephen. Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to come in with that, or is that a suitable answer for you as well?
I'm just trying to kind of get to the best route of where we go with it eventually. So just taking all the information on board. Thank you. That's brilliant.
So what we've got is I'm going to get Chris McElhenney to come in, because I think Chris is going to move this back to either the budget working group or P&R. So I'll let Chris come in himself and he could tell us what he wants to do. Chris?
I've had to come back in on another device because I don't know what's going on. My other login was freezing up. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. No. Basically, I think I hear what everyone's saying, but the point I was making was I want the committee to say that free swimming should remain in place. So that'll obviously create a budget pressure because, if you don't cut it to a subsidy on certain days and only allow it at the weekend for a certain time, if it's just the same policies we've got at the moment, the status quo, that creates a budget pressure. So that budget pressure, as in previous years, what happened was it was referred to the members' working budget group, with it obviously, which is not a decision-making body, but with a proviso that they would consider that as part of the budget process. So that's what I'm proposing, that the committee approves that the provision of universal free swimming as an existing policy remains in place, and that the budget pressure that creates is referred to the members' budget working group.
Again, I'm going to need to let Anne come in here and guide me, because that's not what the policy is. The policy is not free school swimming. We have changed that policy in the budget of last year, in so much that what we are doing now is subsidised swimming. Now, that is the policy as is just now. So the policy is subsidised swimming. What we've actually got here is we're trying to contain it within the education budget, with the wish of the Education Committee to continue for this year only with free school swimming, in order that the next administration can decide whether or not that is the route they want to go down. So that's my understanding where we are, and I would like you to come in and comment.
You, Convener, that was also my understanding, that what we are talking about is the issue of subsidised swimming, and the report is setting out options for subsidised swimming, but as an alternative there's proposals in the final paragraph of 2.4, and it's set out in 5.4 that there is this option to continue with the status quo for 2022-23 with the pressure coming from the Community Grants Fund. So that would be a competent decision for the committee to make today, should members be minded to do so, but note that the matter would be referred to the member budget working group afresh when the decision has already been made. Hopefully that's clear.
That's sorry, it's Kai Convener. I'm apologies. I don't like having to disagree with officers, but the standing orders only stop a decision being made or reviewed or changed again within a fixed time window. So I don't see how there's any restriction in terms of competence in a member saying, I want to propose this, in terms of I want free swimming to be reinstated as per the previous precision. That will clearly create a pressure and that should be referred to the members' budget working group. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, to be honest, I don't even know why, as convener, you're referring that to our legal officer when you've got the chief officer here the chief officer's here to advise you. I don't know why you need a legal opinion on whether you've been a councillor since 19canteen. Of course, a committee can ask for something, and if it doesn't have the funding, it's got to refer it somewhere else.
Chris, if you let me come in, it's because it's on the competency in your motion. So on the competency in your motion, I asked for legal advice on the competency in your motion. I clearly thought that your motion is incompetent. Now, that's my view. And so therefore, rather than asking my chief corporate director, I asked our legal advisor here. So that's where I'm coming from for that, Chris. And that's quite clearly my role as a convener in order to do that. Now, we're getting hold up again. I noticed that Councillor McCabe, I think, are you wishing to comment, Stephen?
Well, that was the previous comment, convener. I'm quite happy to get the decision.
Convener, through you, apologies for interrupting. I wonder if one option is if the matter was referred to the members' budget working group, they could then refer it back to P&R for a decision in relation to this matter.
Well, if that's what I mean, quite clearly, I think we should actually take the decision now, and it's nice and clear, and it's in the remit of this. If you remember, it was P&R actually batted it to this committee to make these decisions. So I think using it as a tennis ball is not in the best interest of the young people in Inverclyde. So
convener, just as the chair of the P&R committee, just to clarify, no, it was a decision of the full council taken unanimously by every single member of the full council, including every single member of this committee, that the budget for free swimming, or subsidised swimming as we're now calling it, should be reduced by £100,000. We all agreed to that, and therefore we all agreed to live with the consequences of that decision. It seems that some people don't want to live with the consequences of that decision. I'm perfectly happy to support the continuation of free swimming, and there's a viable option on the table to allow us to achieve that. But some people just want to kick the can further down the road in the hope that a magic solution will come up from somewhere else. What do we want to cut funding from another committee to help continue with? We've got the biggest committee. This committee's got the biggest budget in the council.
I'm going to move on to the motions. As you know, what I've moved is the continuation of free swimming using the way outlined on 5.4. In order to do that, I think it's the clearest way for this committee, and obviously as well to go ahead with the pilot project and free gym usage. So that is the motion that's in front of you now. Can I ask, is anybody against that motion?
Yeah, I'll move an amendment to that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, convener. And as an aside, I don't know why we're still calling it free swimming, because I'm just checking for clarity here. You want to support option 3, which says that swimming would cost what, £1.60 and £2.60.
That's not the case. Councillor McElhinney is misrepresenting what you
Councillor McElhinney knows that's not the case. And it's right. So I have now moved. Chris, if you want to...
Sorry, can you repeat? Can you reiterate what you've moved then?
Right. What I'm actually saying is that we continue with free school swimming, and what we're actually doing is we're using it as in the money as in 5.4. The pressure of £40,000, which will be funded from the Community Grants Fund. And that's the cleanest way to do it. And that allows us to continue the free school swimming for this financial year. I thought that was quite clear, and I'm sorry if it wasn't.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Apologies accepted. It was clear.
It was clear.
It was clear now that you've said it.
It was clear. I'm glad you thought it was clear.
Yeah. Okay. No, but I still want to move an amendment. I mean, I think there's a simple principle that it's okay to disagree, and it's okay to change your mind. that the committee.
And if you remember as well, Chris, you're saying that, but if you remember, it was the same administration that put £60,000 towards Ravenscraig, and we never got support from that from any other party. And it was that administration that had to actually fund that in order to ensure that Ravenscraig stayed home. So I think.
I don't know why you're talking about that. I thought it was
Because
going to move
you mentioned it earlier on, Chris. Right.
Yeah.
Let's go to,
Yeah, but
to move
40
your
minutes
amendment.
ago. Yeah, I want to move that the committee endorses that free swimming is reinstated as per the previous provision, and that budget pressures referred to the members' budget working group.
And I've already said I think that's incompetent. I think our legal person has ruled that that's incompetent. I'm just going to check that that is still the case.
It's absolutely not incompetent. Sorry, I want it this minute if the legal officer saying it's incompetent then.
Chair, apologies.
Can you give her a chance?
Through you, convener, apologies. I had corrected myself. I did rule that it was incompetent, but I came back in and I said that there was a route that it could go to the members' budget working group and then back to a policy and resources committee. But I then understood there was a debate in relation to that particular proposal.
So it's not incompetent.
So what
in
is
the view of the legal officer?
So I note Councillor McElhenny's amendment is that the committee endorses that free swimming is reinstated as per previous arrangements. And can you confirm the rest of the amendment, please, Councillor McElhenny?
And the budget pressure that creates is referred to the members' budget working group.
Ruth?
I think the difficulty is that the committee would then be making a decision that it doesn't have the budget for. So I think that reinstating free swimming is the issue in my mind, because there is no budget within this committee. So I think
and there was no budget in the Health and Social Care Committee for the construction at the Hector McNeil's bath site. So we made a decision with the proviso that we would refer to the members' working budget group. I mean, I think we've done this like 8 or 10 times over the last 3 or 4 years, that the committee makes, a decision that has to get referred to the members' budget working group. I mean, it's absolutely fine that people don't agree with me, right? But you can't say it can't be done. You can't. I mean, it's like 3 times that I've, as a member of this committee, been told I'm incompetent, and legal officers have said I'm incompetent. If a convener's ruled it's incompetent, they come back in and tell me I'm not incompetent, when of course I'm not incompetent. You might not agree, and it'll go to a vote, and I might lose the vote, but it's competent, and what I'm proposing is competent, and I think it's pretty clear, and it should go to a vote.
Chris, I know you like playing with history, but let's be very clear. I asked for legal advice because of what I thought myself, but I didn't want to rule it myself, so therefore I asked for legal advice on that. I got that legal advice once. The legal advice has changed on that, so therefore we're taking your motion as is. I'm putting through what I've already stated, and Anne's got a note of that, and I think we should just go to the vote on it.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. So I have a Councillor Clogherty's motion, which is the continuation of free swimming as set out in paragraph 5.4 of the report, with the budget pressure being funded from the Community Grants Fund. And I have Councillor McElhenny's amendment to that motion, that the committee endorses that free swimming is reinstated as per previous arrangements, and that this budget pressure is referred to the members' budget working group. I'll ask each member whether they support the motion or the amendment.
Sorry, Anne,
yes.
can I just say, I was just reading a comment that Councillor Quinn put in the chat. I'm happy for that to be agreed with the committee. I think Councillor Clogherty would as well, so I don't think we would need to alter any proposals. I guess the committee would be happy with that we consult with the school children.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Ruth covered that. Ruth?
I think I'm still unclear as to the timing. So, so if we're going to undertake a consultation, what my understanding is you're saying to reinstate free swimming. You're not saying until a certain point. You're saying to reinstate free swimming.
No, sorry. Councillor Quinn's points is in regard to the free gym use aspect of the report.
So
okay, apologies, I thought it was linked in together.
So Councillor Quinn has put a comment in the chat function. If there could be an agreement that consultation with pupils will take place at the same time as pilot for free gym use, can this form part of the next report in this item? I wonder, it would perhaps be helpful in relation to the recommendation in 3.1. I understand the vote will be on the first bullet point. I wonder, through you, convener, could we confirm that there's agreement in relation to the second bullet point?
The second bullet point is just for noting, but we could take Councillor Quinn's point of view in board with regard to consultation with pupils.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to add to confusion. I just wanted that minuted in action, just trying to stay out the first, move on at the second bullet point. So,
Stephen, you want to come back in before we go to the vote?
Yeah, just to clarify a couple of points. Firstly, free swimming still is in place at this point in time, so we're not reinstating free swimming. It still is being provided at this point in time. The issue is how do we fund it going forward? And the reality is this committee cannot take policies decisions without funding in place. So it isn't a matter of saying we're going ahead with free swimming. It's a matter of saying that subject to funding being made available through the budget processor from Policy and Resources, then free swimming will go forward in the next financial year. So the reality is that we cannot go forward. And if that fund is not available, then the report will come right back to this committee and we'll have to be dealing with the same issue. So the one way of dealing with it and putting it to bed is to say we can fund it within this committee's own budget. The savings now being reduced from 80,000 down to 40,000, so it can be dealt with today. We may well be back here again. So that's all I would say.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Let's move to the vote.
Okay, thank you, convener. Provost, do you support the motion or amendment?
Just to be absolutely clear, the motion is
for myself.
So that's
Councillor
Councillor
Clougherty's
Clougherty's motion
Yeah,
to continue with the free swimming option that's set out in paragraph 5.4, that this would continue to be delivered for 2022-23, and that would leave a budget pressure of 40,000, which could be funded from the Community Grants Fund.
Thanks very much, and yes, I support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Clougherty.
Motion.
Councillor Curley. I can't hear you. Motion. Thank you. Councillor MacLeod, motion or amendment?
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe.
Motion.
Councillor McElhenney.
Amendment.
Councillor McVeigh.
Motion.
Councillor Murphy.
motion.
Thank you. Councillor Quinn.
Motion.
And Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Okay, and I've noted Councillor Wilson has left the meeting. I make that 9 votes for the motion and 1 vote for the amendment.
Dave, thanks for that. Can we move along swiftly to agenda item number 7, which is the results of the Citizens Panel 2021 survey. Do we have, who's taking this through us? Is it Karen?
It's me, convener, please, Karen Barclay.
Yep, Karen.
Thank you, convener. This agenda item outlines the results of the Citizens Panel Autumn 2021 survey. As members will be aware, reports about the Citizens Panel are usually submitted to the Policy and Resources Committee. However, given that the topics covered in the last panel survey both fall under the remit of the Culture, Communities and Educational Resources Committee, it was agreed that in this instance the results should be reported to the Education and Communities Committee. There were 2 topics covered in the questionnaire: historic links to slavery, which you heard about earlier in the meeting, and Inverclyde's libraries. To put the results into context, it's worth noting that the questionnaire was issued in the first week of September last year. In terms of libraries, while local library use is not what we would normally expect, there are many positives to be taken from panel members' answers. For example, respondents were asked to comment on a number of words that could be used to describe Inverclyde libraries. The top 5 words that people strongly agreed with were essential for society, approachable staff, helpful, knowledgeable staff, and our libraries were accessible. In contrast, the words which the greatest number of people disagreed with when asked to describe our libraries is boring, with 71% of respondents choosing this description. In terms of recommendations, what the committee is being asked to do today is to note the main findings from the Citizens Panel Autumn 2021 survey and take account of the results when reviewing service delivery as appropriate. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Cam. Open up to questions from members. Jim, you want to come in first this time?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, I was just wondering if Alana could answer. Obviously, there's many more people now, including older people, who are using laptops, computers, iPads, and the like, and Kindles as well, for a whole host of things, but also for reading books. I mean, I realise there are still many people who like the feel of a book and turning a page and reading the books the traditional way. But I just wonder what sort of impact in recent years the growth of people using IT for getting information and reading books has had, particularly, in the pandemic and as we come out of the pandemic. The other thing is, as well, as I know that certainly library services went out to the community when we were at the height of the pandemic, reached out to the community. And I just wondered, with demography changes, increasing numbers of older people, many of them housebound, I wonder what facilities there are for the library to reach out more so in the future to actually take books to people's homes. Thank you.
Alana, would you like to take that?
Yes, no problem. Through you, convener, the impact on books and reading that we've seen through the pandemic is an increase, you won't be surprised to hear, in digital reading, be that ebooks or e-audio books. So we have offered these facilities for a number of years. We have found an increasing number of library users choosing to get the reading material in this way. I think it's fair to say that the pandemic accelerated that quite considerably, and so there are now a much larger number of library users who are obtaining their reading material in this way, and I think that has carried on as we have been through the various phases of recovery. We have responded to that by increasing our budget where we can in terms of our purchasing of ebooks and e-audiobooks. These titles are actually much more expensive for us to purchase than a physical book is, so it's not the easiest thing to keep up with. But what we've done is we have looked at what demand is there and tried our best to meet it by aligning our budget, such as it is, to the forms of reading that people are choosing. So I hope that answers your first question. Your second question on the library and the library outreach, members will be aware that throughout the pandemic, the library has been open, closed, as many other services have been. But throughout, we have been able to maintain our Books on Wheels service, which is taking reading material out to people in our communities. Prior to the pandemic, this would have been people really who were housebound and couldn't leave the house. However, we've much decreased the sort of standard required for the people who would be able to access that service, and we've decreased the sort of the age group, and we provided reading material for people who were shielding throughout the pandemic. As we sort of start to come out of that, we have some recovery funding which we are using to boost our capacity in terms of our deliveries, and so we are still being being able to offer a much increased delivery service on what we would have been offering kind of, you know, in 2019 prior to the pandemic. So to answer, you know, both your questions, we've pivoted digitally in terms of books and reading, and we've also pivoted in terms of a greater number of deliveries from the delivery service.
Thanks for that full answer, Alana. Is that okay for you, Jim?
Yeah, I would just say, Jim, that again, I commend Alana and the library services for the hard work that have actually done. And I would just say that the outreach service that they have at the moment has worked really, really well. And as I say, it'd be good if you can continue to extend that as we hopefully come out of the pandemic. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Can I go to the Provost, Martin?
Thanks, Jim. It's just I'm curious, Alana, do you think the library using public is equivalent to the public which reads books? Or do you think there's a large number of book readers who don't use a library?
Through you, convener.
That's a nice question, Alana.
Without having done that research, I couldn't say definitively, but my view is that there will be probably a number of readers within the community who don't use library services for whatever reason. That may be that they have the money to purchase anything that they wish to read. That obviously does not apply to everybody, but you know, we're a universal service. Obviously anybody can come in and use the library service, but no, I suspect the reading public in Inverclyde is probably larger than the Inverclyde libraries using public.
I know you wouldn't have done research yourself, Alana. You know, it's a bit esoteric, the question, but have you any idea of book reading in Britain? No.
Through you, convener. My understanding is that book reading is still at a pretty high level throughout the UK, and it's also my understanding that this increased significantly during the pandemic. You know, with everybody obviously being confined to their homes for large periods of time, some of the activities that might normally compete with reading were not possible for people. So I believe there's been quite a boom in online library use now that the libraries are open again, in physical library use and to the publishing trade. So yes, I believe there is a lot more book reading which was happening during the pandemic. Whether that will continue as we move through recovery, I couldn't say.
Thanks. Right, no, that's great, Alana. Thank you.
Okay, Martin. We've got no other questions on this. Can we agree the paper and can we thank Taryn and Alana? Thank you. Can we move to, which is in the paper, agenda item number 17, but obviously it's the extra agenda item on the communities, and that is a request from Councillor McElhenney as outlined in Appendix 1 of the report. Now, I do know we have Mark McNoab, I believe, has joined us today. So I don't know, Chris, if you want to introduce your request first, and then we'll get Martin McNabb's comment on it. So I'll fly over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Jim. Having connection again, I'm just checking.
Yep.
I think that the way it's written kind of sets out and points, and I notice we're pushing half through, so I wouldn't really intend to say much more other than I think the legislations are laudable and we follow them. You know, the need to have a device in your room isn't really sensitive to me because a bigger electrical thermal dryer, heat tech, which are required for your kitchen.
Listen, unfortunately, you're breaking up a wee bit. We're finding it hard to actually listen to you. or to hear you, not to listen to you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to firstly ask Martin McNabb to comment on your paper. Hopefully you'll get your connection back there. I've got one question so far for Councillor McCabe. I'll let him to come into his question, and then by that time, hopefully you'll be back connected again, Chris. So Martin, would you like to comment?
Okay, so I think there's kind of two main issues here. One is the kind of extent of compliance and how that will be achieved, and probably the second one is about funding. So if we look at the first one first, we've obviously got kind of three main tenures of housing. We've got RSLs, we've got private sector, private rented sector, and we have owner occupiers. Now, the RSLs, we've done a wee bit of research, and the bulk of the RSLs, although I don't have all the figures yet, are at well over 90% compliance with this already, because they've been preparing for this for quite some time. So that sector is quite well taken care of. The private rented sector is slightly more complex, because obviously there's a lot of landlords. What we want to try and ensure is that we are looking at compliance in a consistent manner across Scotland, and I think there's quite a lot of conversation going on with Scottish Government on how that might be done. On the owner occupiers, I think probably it'd be best if what I'm going to do is
Martin, you've muted yourself.
Not sure how I did that. I posted a statement in the chat, and I'll just read that out for Councillor McElhenney and Councillor MacLeod's benefit. This is a joint statement from COSLA and the Scottish Government, recognising, I think, the difficulty of actually getting compliance here. So what the statement says is, improving fire safety remains an important priority for both national and local government. Legislation provides flexibility for people to fit the necessary alarms in due course if they are unable to do so by the February 2022 deadline. As a result, local authorities will be taking a proportionate and measured approach to compliance, taking individual circumstances into account, as well as reflecting the evolving situation with the COVID-19 pandemic. No one will be criminalised if they need more time, and there are no penalties for non-compliance. However, we would encourage everyone to install these alarms, which can help save lives. Now, the requirement for the alarms is in the tolerable standard. It's also in the repairing standard. However, we also have things in the tolerable standard, like the fact that houses should be sufficiently insulated. However, we do not. It's there to encourage people. It's quite hard to enforce. We would enforce if somebody was failing a major part or a number of parts of the tolerable standard by serving closing orders or demolition orders on properties. However, realistically, we're not going to do that for a lack of a fire alarm, and we would get nowhere if we tried to do that for lack of a fire alarm. So our view is that the main route to compliance for owner occupiers is going to be round about when properties are sold. That I think we'll find that that solicitors will wish to see this as part of a sale, to see that the property is compliant, and that will take a very, very long time to feed through the system. In terms of funding, the Scottish Government has provided a fund to allow people to have alarms fitted if they are owner occupiers in council tax bands A to C, are of state pension age and in receipt of guaranteed pension credit, or have a disability and are in the support group for employment and support allowance. So that element is being delivered in Inverclyde by Bridgewater Care and Repair. We advertised their service back in November, and their books are currently full up until the end of March. So once they have scope again, and if there's more funding, we will make that known to members. But at the moment, they are fully booked till the end of March. They're also able to do private installations at a cost for people who don't meet those criteria. The only other question I think that remains is about insurance, and there's been quite a bit of discussion. I think you'll probably have seen it in the media about whether people's house insurance will be invalid if they don't meet this requirement. At the moment, the Association of British Insurers seem to be saying that their policies are UK-wide, and as this is a Scotland-only change to the legislation, they won't be making it part of a requirement for the insurance to be valid. Having said that, they did caveat that by saying, I think, at this time. So I think that's one that we need to keep an eye on. And owner-occupiers are probably well advised to actually check with their own insurers that their insurance won't be invalidated if they don't meet these criteria. So I think that's roughly where we are. One of the challenges we would face in Councillor McElhaney's request is actually getting any handle into how many people have had these installed. We can do it quite easily for the RSLs, and we can find out from Care and Repair what they've done. But beyond that, I think it will be very, very difficult to find out. What I suspect is that the level of compliance at this point will be very low.
Okay, Martin. Now, I'm going to ask Chris, are you still with us? Because I don't want to carry on if you're not.
Yes,
You're still here, good. Okay.
I phoned back in, yeah. Yeah, what I was saying is I think that the motion kind of explains itself, and I wouldn't add much other than certainly as laudable. I note that the Labour Party did lead a debate in the Scottish Parliament, I think maybe a few days after I'd submitted this, and similar points were raised about, you know, a lack of information, lack of clarity on issues such as insurance, lack of clarity on issues such as compliance, and I think there's been concessions that, you know, it's just really not been advertised. And as I say, the aims are laudable, but again, I don't really see the benefit in some of the, like for example, I don't see the benefit of having you need a carbon monoxide detector if you've got a combustible, boiler in your, most likely in your kitchen, some people in bedrooms, but that doesn't need to be interlinked, and the majority of carbon monoxide fatalities happen during people's sleep. So, it doesn't make any sense then that you would not interlink a carbon monoxide detector that may be in a separate floor in a separate room. And as I say, the requirement for a heat detector in a kitchen, again, I don't really see the merit on that, because if you get an electrical appliance catches fire, or you've got your fridge rammed up against the wall, and I'd imagine nobody regularly takes a fridge out and cleans this off the heating coils at the back of it. These things are going to be up in smoke and spreading fire long before a heat detector goes off that will be strategically positioned, no doubt, away from your hob. So I say it's laudable, but I just think it's fraught with errors. And obviously the big concern is people that don't tick any of the boxes that Mr. McNabb signalled there. Electricians probably wouldn't take up the work because it's not worth their while. And you would be robbing people if you were putting hard wires in for them just to put smoke detectors on them, and the money that would cost. So I just don't see how there's going to be any reasonable level of adherence to this above 10 or 15%. And I think Martin's right. You probably find a lot of people will do this just when they need to tick a box on a home report, which means you've got laudable legislation, but it's effectively ineffective for two reasons. The Scottish Government haven't really promoted it well enough, and secondly, they've not really put it, I think 500,000 across Scotland's the budget. So I guess from an Inverclyde point of view, it was divided by 62 or something, a small five-figure sum, I guess. It doesn't really scratch the surface, and once that pot's depleted, I'm sure there will be many pensioners in Inverclyde that didn't manage to get anything for that pot. And I think if that is the case, these are the people that we should be advocating on their behalf to the government to put more funding in place if they want people to come up to their standards. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I'm acutely aware of the time, so what I'm going to quickly do is let the other people in who have asked questions. So the first one is Councillor McCabe. Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. It's helpful that Martin is at the committee today. I mean, I had a few questions for Martin, but I think more or less he's answered them. So the first question was about what are the legal responsibilities of homeowners and landlords, and I think you've largely addressed that. The second one was about what is the actual responsibilities of the council in terms of supporting the implementation of this legislation, and to some extent you've answered that. But the last one was the more practical one related to the actual request from the member, which is about officers bringing back a report on the estimation of how many households have installed new smoke alarms. And what Martin's saying is that, well, we can ask the RSLs to provide that information for their stock, and on the basis of that, obviously we believe that would be fairly accurate. But in terms of private rented stock and owner-occupiers, to me, before we actually ask officers to bring back a report with an estimate, we'd need to understand how officers would go about producing that estimate and what sort of resource would be required in trying to produce that estimate. So it'd be helpful to get Martin's feedback on those particular points. Martin?
So before I cover that through you, convener, I should probably also add that you may have, I didn't say that you may have seen that there are issues over supply of these devices. They all have chips in them, and there's a global shortage of chips. And I do wonder if the issue about the carbon monoxide not being linked is simply a technological issue. I don't know, though. That's speculation. In terms of how we could find out, what I would suggest is we are shortly going to be carrying out a house condition survey as part of our local housing strategy, and we could try and see if there's a way of incorporating an element this into that. Now, a lot of that survey will be done, some of that survey will be done to the exterior of buildings, won't necessarily be going in, but I don't see why we can't actually try and find out through that and it'll give us a kind of rough idea of the level of compliance. Although, as I say, I expect it will be very low, but I think that's probably the best way of taking this forward.
So presumably that's based on a sample survey and then extrapolating it, yeah.
Yeah, so the sample survey will be roughly, I think, around about 1,000 properties.
So you wouldn't be intending to write to all 30,000 privately owned houses in Inverclyde and asking if they've complied, or knocking the door and wanting to be sure?
I doubt very much we get much of a response, to be honest. But I think probably just doing the sample will at least give us an idea that we can come back and say, well, this is what we think overall compliance might look like.
Okay, thanks,
Stephen. Now, I'm acutely aware of the time. Chris and Martin, I'm going to bring you in if you could be short and concise if possible.
Question answered with Martin, so that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Provost, Martin?
Jim, just an observation. I think the approach to this has been quite cack-handed. I had an elderly pensioner, female, not my wife, phoned me the other day and asked about this. I mean, she was quite agitated about it. And I told her to wait, but she didn't. She went to an electrician and he's going to charge her £320 to make her compliant. I think that all comes, the origin of that is the way that has been communicated to the public. That's it.
No, I think that point's well made, and I know Tommy's here. Tommy, I know that was raised at Police and Fire as well, so I think these points are well raised. Stephen, does what Martin said to you, does that give you enough to allow us to unanimously pass Chris's motion, if it's called a motion, or does anybody want to come in opposing it?
Through you, Chair. Just it's a request, a member's request rather than a motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we agree with Chris's request.
Convener, can I just very quickly, I'm not going to go over old ground here, but just regarding a list of, tradesmen, and I know it's a difficult thing to do, but bearing in mind what Martin has just said, You know, we want to ensure that people are going to get these fitted well. And is there any way we can point people towards any businesses or individuals who are well known people can use?
And I know we do the trusted trader still, but I'll let Martin answer. Martin?
Yeah, so there is a need for us to refresh our trusted trader scheme, and we're aware of this because it has lapsed slightly over lockdown. However, we do have contractors on there that have been historically okay, and anybody on that list or on any neighbouring authorities' trusted trader list should be fine. Beyond that, I think it's quite hard to go any further, but certainly they should be able to do it. The issue might be, as I said earlier, that one about willingness to carry out this work, or the supply of the actual devices, because I think they are getting quite rare and quite hard to get hold of. So it could take a long time to work through.
Excuse me. Thanks for that, Martin. Now, if that's okay for you, Jim, I'm going to let the last comment on this go to the chair of the Police and Fire Committee, and that's Tommy. Tommy?
Yes, thanks, convener. Just as you alluded to earlier, Jim, this was raised at Police and Fire, and we did write to the Scottish Government expressing our concerns on some aspects of it, and we did get a response. And again, I discussed with Ruth and George has done some communication to the public on the council's website and via the fire service as well. I don't know if George wants to comment on that, but we are very well aware, and thanks to Martin and some of the other officers who have been involved in this since probably August last year.
Okay, thanks for your comments, Tommy. And with that, can we agree with Chris's request?
Great.
No dissenters. Right, thank you. And can I thank you very much for your support today, and I look forward to seeing you in